All right, Tyler, welcome, welcome. How was your Thanksgiving? What's happening with you today?
Oh, it was good. I started doing a detox after Thanksgiving of just raw veggies for 3.5 days, and I just broke it today with a cheeseburger, so I feel much better. I had to get some real food in me before we did this.
Oh, nice. Is that just because of the one meal or just in general? Do you do that
Just
on the
in general,
regular? Yeah.
just in general, it's actually part of a longer detox I'm doing, but I really needed some. I just needed some food today before this tonight, just so I didn't pass out, because it's really hard to maintain your energy levels when you're eating like that.
Yeah, it can be, especially if it's just on again, off again. If you don't give yourself a couple of months to acclimate, it can be. Have you done any parasite cleanses or the NAC protocol or anything like that with the whole thinking that the fungus and parasites can actually act as some kind of substrate that allows the negative NHI to get a hold of us a little easier. Have you heard of that?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I've heard of it and I believe it, and I think it's kind of the reality of the situation on the planet. I've done a number of parasite cleanses, and I like the chlorine dioxide, the MMS protocol. It seems to be the most intense, but most effective. I mean, there's a few different ones I like, but I mean, I think it's crucial for anybody that's going through the awakening because I mean, until you like a clear, pure vessel, like you can't even like discern truth from deception. You got to make sure that like your mind is clear and not being controlled by parasites, whatever else could be, all the technologies that might control us, but we don't always think about the parasites that might control us. So I think it's the most important thing to even focus on.
Yeah, I agree. I was on the NAC protocol for quite some time. It ended up really bothering my stomach. I wasn't able to continue, but I was on it for months. And yeah, super interesting stuff. So Hiker Gal's with us. Welcome, Hiker Gal.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm sorry I'm late, but all's right with the world again. So, yay.
Yeah, awesome. We have not really gotten started yet, so if everyone could just retweet the space. Y'all know that me and Hiker Gal do some experiencer spaces here and there every few Mondays or so. It's been a little sporadic lately, just with everything that's been going on. But today we have Tyler with us. Tyler is one half of the Journey to Truth podcast. I don't think we're going to have Aaron with us today. Aaron is the other half. I've actually had the pleasure of being on Aaron and Tyler's podcast. It was super exciting because partly because the podcast was involved in a small way in my own journey, and also because me and Tyler have some interesting experiences that we not shared experiences, but we have some that are similar. And that actually brings me to the title of our space today. So I titled this space Definitely No Super Soldiers or Aliens. And the reason I put super soldiers in this space is because I just wanted to get that trigger over with right away. So there's something that in this community. Well, first of all, I think the community is somewhat reluctant to listen to experiencers because we're kind of focused on the nuts and bolts. When's the government going to disclose to us? And when experiencers open our mouths, what we speak about sounds like science fiction. It's kind of a whole different world than the nuts and bolts. It can sound pretty nutty, to be honest, right? So we have experiencers kind of at the fringe of this community. And then beyond experiencers, we have an entire other thing going on with this MK Ultra programming, um, the categories like super soldiers. And unfortunately, that is a very triggering category for a lot of people. I'm not sure why, other than apparently Corey Good and David Wilcock lied about something to do with this some time ago, and they were caught lying in court or some nonsense like that. And so I think what tends to happen is everyone just throws the baby out with the bathwater. People say things like, there's no such thing as a super soldier. There's no such thing as 20 and back. That was a lie. It was made up by Corey Good and David Wilcock. And anyone who speaks about that stuff should not be believed. And it's a topic that is not well discussed in the community because of that. I can tell you that at least a handful of people in the room, as I'm looking around this room, are experiencing these things. Just because Corey Good lied about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And people speak about these things privately because it's hard enough to come out and say, I'm an experiencer, I'm an abductee. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to try to say that bad things happen to you, now you know you've gone too far down the rabbit hole for anyone. And then to get into these topics such as super soldiers and MK Ultra programming and being recruited into covert military programs, it's just not believed. There's no credibility there. A lot of people just completely avoid the topic. So I put that in the space title because I just want to get that trigger over with right away. If it's something you don't want to hear about, if you think it's a grift, if you think it's a lie, or everybody's just making it up, then just, you don't have to listen. So there it is. So thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us. I really appreciate you being here. We had just a little bit of chit chat before the space, so I have a little outline of some of the things that you've experienced. But I just want to start wherever you want to start, wherever you want to go with it. For the audience, we will be opening up to audience questions as soon as, when we get through Tyler's story. We don't want to rush him. We just want to get through the whole story as much as we can cover today. And then we'll be happy to open it up for questions. I'm sure you will have some. So, Tyler, welcome to the space. Thank you for being here. Where do you want to start? I was thinking, even though I see your experiences started off around 2010, I usually like to get a little bit of background. Did you have an interesting childhood? What did your parents do for a living? Were your parents experiencers as well? If you don't mind starting there, but if you do, we can start anywhere you like. Welcome, Tyler. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's a lot there. So there's like, major different parts to my story, different major parts to my story, and it can't all be covered in one sitting, really, because it's just pretty intense. But I did want to start off by commenting on something that you were just talking about with the 20 and back stuff and the Corey Goods and David Wilcock and all that, court deposition and the lies. Just through my own research, and Aaron and I, we do webinars, and there's information that goes back to the year 2000 is the earliest we can find of Michael Relf, the Mars Records. It's a PDF book that was released in the year 2000 where he talks about a 20 and back um, program where he spent time on Mars. And so that's the first time we've actually heard that. So it didn't come from Corey in 2014, and Randy Kramer was before that. And then William Tompkins' testimony, if anyone's familiar with him, he's a former Navy veteran who passed away after he went public. But he he claims in his book, Selected by Extraterrestrials, that the U.S. Navy started the 20 and back program in 1980. Now, the Germans had already had their program running way well before them, but the Navy adopted that technology, and it wasn't until 1980, according to Tompkins. So, I mean, there's a lot of corroborating information out there that supports the 20 and back and the secret space program, and it's one of the things that we cover heavily, actually. And it's obviously it's people make a mockery of it now because of certain individuals, and the whole thing with Corey. I'm not defending him, but I do know from speaking to lawyers that if you're trying to protect your intellectual property in court, the only way to win the case is to say you made it up. That's He was trying to claim that this was, a lot of 20 and back and certain these terms were his IP. Well, the only way to win is to say you made it up. If you say it's a real thing, then it's not your intellectual property, and you lose the case. So I mean, he had to say that to win. So, I mean, there's a lot more involved than people really think about. So, um, I just wanted to address that before I get into anything else.
And
So,
Tyler, you're right. And I'm really glad you said that because that's something that Tom likes to bring up as well. Tom Montauk, we have regular spaces with him. He has pointed out several times that this idea was around long before Corey Good. It's not something that he just decided, to make up. He might have lied. Maybe lied, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But it was something that was around long before him. So a lot of people try to say, well, he made it up and now everybody's just grifting onto it. And in fact, it actually existed before he supposedly made it up. So thank you for pointing that out.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so going back to my childhood, I mean, I really didn't, I wouldn't say it was nothing special happened. regards to paranormal activity, ET abduction, nothing like that that I recalled until my mother passed away when I was 24, and overnight, that's when things started. Like somebody flipped a switch. That's when like the dark negative attacks started. Like literally right after she passed away, and I have my theories on why that started, but it wasn't until you start going through the awakening and all this stuff starts happening to you that you reflect on your childhood and start thinking about, oh, what was that recurring dream that I had, at age 5? What was that about? And then more and more starts becoming clear because either the memories were intentionally suppressed or you just suppressed them, because they're traumatic experiences, and you just file them away and they're compartmentalized until something later in life triggers that, which I know people can relate to. So really, there's nothing that stood out to me during my childhood. It wasn't until looking back on it later. The one thing, because after being approached by certain recruiters to join these programs, and and learning about, not just the secret space program, but just like the private sector of the military industrial complex and all of the intelligence agencies and all the organizations that they have running, they're kind of running the show here on the planet, and the assassins and the super soldiers, which I know is a triggering word, and it's very cringe because you see it and you think of a comic book and it turns you off, but there is a reality to the situation. There's articles, the military themselves, like the Navy and the Army and even the Marines. There are literal articles you can go back dating to the early 2000s talking about the development of super soldier programs. It's not even a woo topic. The information's there. The articles are there. And what that looks like is genetic alterations, implants. It's very subtle things that they do to individuals to enhance their abilities. It doesn't have to look like some man in a exoskeleton suit running around. It could, but that's just something to note because there is information out there supporting the super soldier theories. It's not really a theory, actually. But once I started learning about all that stuff, I thought back to a time in my childhood, 5th grade. I remembered the Air Force came into our classroom in 5th grade, and they asked everybody in the class to draw a spaceship, to create, not just draw a spaceship, but design your own spaceship. And they said because kids have the best ideas. And so the whole class, most of the class was drawing rockets because that's what, we were programmed to draw. And I remember specifically drawing a triangle, like a TR3B, and I drew a triangle. And I almost crumpled it up and threw it away because I was embarrassed because no one else drew what I drew. And I almost just crumpled it up and drew a rocket. But nevertheless, I turned in the triangle, and the guy was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Did you come up with that on your own?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever." It didn't think twice of it, and that's where that memory ends. But I often wonder, like, what were they doing when they came into the classroom? Was it like an evaluation to see what these kids remembered, or if they are just, because I think maybe if you're taken into the programs and brought back, like a 20 and back scenario, maybe they want to see what or if you remember anything, and that's one way of testing. I don't know. We can speculate, but um, that's the only really thing that stands out significantly in my childhood.
And then were your parents involved in anything super cool like super spies or, JPL or Lockheed Martin or intelligence agencies, military, anything like that?
No, I had some family in the military, but not my parents. My grandfather, my dad's side, um, was just in the National Guard, and then my mom's brother, my uncle, was a Marine, and I have some cousins. I have family in the military, but nothing from the parents. No,
And then last but least, were you in GATE?
no, I wasn't, but I did. So we did grow up in right near a military base. Actually, it's Jefferson Barracks is the name of the townhomes they're called now, but during the Civil War they were barracks used for the families of the soldiers. And then it was right across the street from the officer housing, and then there's like a military base there. Still, it was abandoned for a while, and it's active again. And they, now it's used for boot camp and training again. And there's definitely it leads to an underground tunnel network, which we can get into. But I've had a lot of my story takes place there, and it's interesting that I basically grew up on base. And it's one of those things you never think about. I I had some friends in town, and I was just showing them, the area where I grew up and stuff. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I used to live in these townhomes over here." We were driving, and she's like, "On base?" And it never even occurred to me that I grew up on base. Like it never, like it's so crazy that you just don't really, when you're born into something, you don't even think about how odd that is, right? And she's like, "On base?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess you're right." And she's like, "Well, no wonder, all this shit's happening to you." So that's just an interesting side note. Uh,
And then did you figure out how did you grow up on base if your parents weren't in the military? Did you ever ask yourself that or figure it out?
yes, it was pretty simple. I just figured it out because the townhomes, they're like government assisted living, so it's very cheap, and we were poor. We were broke. Growing up, my parents were divorced before I was born, so I was going back and forth all the time between my mom and my dad. And my mom's the one who lives in those barracks. We eventually moved there at a very young age. We lived in a house not far at all, actually, and then we moved right into the townhomes, which were the barracks essentially. So I think it was just because it was affordable.
Yeah, that's probably right. Okay. And some of my questions, Tyler, is because I'm trying to figure out my own stuff, right? They're selfish. So your mother passed in 2010, and this is your first anomalous incident, and you spoke about a levitation experience. So do you want to start with that and just kind of see where we go?
Yeah, sure. So, um, yeah, she passed away, and I had never experienced sleep paralysis. I didn't even know what it was actually. That's how I wasn't just. I would say I wasn't. I was in a coma. I wasn't just asleep. Like I was so oblivious to so much stuff. I believed in a lot of like the ETs and stuff, but I was just turned off to all of it. And I was really like in the matrix, and I didn't even know what sleep paralysis was. But yeah, so she passed away, and I guess a couple nights later, uh, it was during the week. I had to work the next day, and I was just laying there in bed, staying with my cousin. I lived with two guys at the time, and I was just laying there watching a Seinfeld DVD because we didn't even have cable. I just moved in with them, and I had the Seinfeld DVDs. That's all I had. So I put one in, and I'm laying there watching it, falling asleep. And as I'm like drifting off to sleep, I thought I was maybe dreaming at first because it was so insane. But my TV remote started levitating off the bed next to me. It just started like raising up out of the bed, and like you kind of just you don't even know what to think. Actually, it's the weirdest feeling. You see it happening and you don't believe that it's happening. Like you really convince yourself that like this is a dream. It all happens so quick, but the TV remote starts raising out of bed, and it gets getting higher and higher, and like as it's like getting out of reach, I'm thinking to myself, well, I better grab that, and I reach up to grab it, and I start coming out of my bed, and I start freaking out. Like, I don't know how to describe the internal panic that happens. And it's still at this point, I thought maybe I was having an out of body experience because I had heard of those before, but I wasn't sure. And I was getting closer and closer to the ceiling, and I somehow managed to flip myself around, like in midair. And when I did that, I was like facing the bed again. And that's when it got real because I saw myself in the mirror. I had mirrored closet doors in the room above my bed. And I saw myself in the mirror, and my body wasn't in bed. And I saw myself floating in the middle of my bedroom and I saw the remote floating next to me, and I panicked. Like I was literally doggy paddling like a kid who was trying to save his life who didn't know how to swim. I was like trying to swim back down into bed, but it's like somebody turned the gravity off for me. And looking back, I was probably in some sort of tractor beam or something. I have no idea. And it seemed to be working. I started like making my way back down into the bed. And as soon as I got close to the bed, like something took over my body and like my arms and legs were crossed and I was slammed down into the bed and I could feel I could feel the presence of something physical on top of me, but I couldn't see it. It was like, I don't know, a demon. It felt, I could feel the weight of it, but I couldn't see it. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I didn't know what sleep paralysis was. So I didn't know that it was even a thing that I could overcome or anything at the time. And I thought something was killing me. I thought somebody was going to find my dead body laying in that bed the next day. You know, they're going to come into the room and find me dead. That's what I was thinking. And it was so intense. You know, and anybody who's experienced sleep paralysis, I would say this is like on steroids though, because I was so weak and vulnerable at the time. I had no weapons, no tools to combat this stuff back then. And I finally started giving myself a pep talk. Like something came over me, and it's like, just move, Tyler. I'm giving myself a pep talk. I'm like, just move, like move your arms. And but I couldn't. And I'm just like, come on, you could do it, you know. And I'm saying in my head, and pardon my language, but I'm like, come on, man, don't be a pussy, don't be a pussy. And I finally broke free somehow, after what seemed like an eternity. And I jumped up out of bed. Flung the bedroom door open, ran down the hall, and I'm just like in the kitchen. I'm like, what the fuck was that? And I'm out of breath. I'm just looking back down the hall, you know, and I eventually catch my breath and walk back down the hall, peek around the corner, like to see if anything's in my room. And I turned the light on, and I never went back to bed that night. Called off work the next day because I just didn't sleep. And that was the beginning of a very long run of very similar experiences like that happening to me. A few different levitations on a couple of occasions, but it got to the point where I was 25 years old and I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid to go to bed. I was afraid to turn my lights off because it was so terrifying. And, you know, I think I was perpetuating more of it by being so afraid of it. You know, you just attract more of that. And I didn't understand that fear was an illusion. You know, it wasn't until really I started having an awakening that I realized there was something I can do about it. But for years, I kind of just suffered in silence.
Wow, that's an incredible story, Tyler. And, one that, gosh, it's happened to so many of us. With all the anecdotal evidence out there, with people like me and you and Hiker Gal and so many people in this room sharing these types of stories, and now with even with your guests that you've had on the podcast and all of the research you've done, what do you think this is? What do you think it was that happened to you just that night?
Yeah, so that was something I wondered about for years, and I had no idea for years. It wasn't until later that I started like booking sessions with channelers and QHHT and all, you know, I tried everybody. Everybody we interviewed would offer a free session and I would take it. And I kind of used it as an experiment in a way. But I started asking questions. I wanted to revisit that time. And what's come through was something very interesting. And I think it's a potential possibility. You know, this is a war for the soul. Ever since the last cataclysm, if you look into galactic history, you know, that's kind of this era is the war for the soul. And it's so much so that we're born into a reality of where we don't even believe that a soul exists, you know, but we're just now catching up to that. And, but they're always after our soul, and they're splitting our soul and fragmenting us, and you know how it is, and taking you and your consciousness and the REM state of sleep and putting you in a clone body, whatever. It's like, um, we're so fragmented. The soul is so fragmented. That's like the name of the game right now. So the way it was described to me was that my mother, like, even they were basically after her soul when she passed away, and as a way to lure her in, they were using me as bait, and I was being attacked basically nightly to try and draw her in. It didn't work allegedly, but um, they knew that she wouldn't be able to stand seeing me suffer in such a way because I was literally suffering. Like I don't like to describe the fear and the trauma that's induced in those moments. You just can't. You can't. You know unless you've lived it. But they knew that she wouldn't be able to stand see me, and they were like hoping that I guess she would come to try and save me. And they had a trap set up. I mean, this is all stuff that came through sessions. I don't know if this happened or not, but it's like my best guess right now because and another thing that came through from somebody was that my mom actually had something working through her, which is possible because she was heavily, I would say, just drugged on pharmaceuticals all the time, and she probably very well probably had entities, but maybe whatever was attached to her found its way to me after she passed away. But that's like my best guess. I don't actually know.
Wow, that's incredible. That is something I haven't heard before, but very interesting that you were possibly being used as some type of bait. Wow, that's just a whole other level. Hiker Gal, what do you think about all this?
I've heard um, the theory that about them wanting to take our souls and everything. I mean, that's a theory that's been going around for a while now. But using it as bait, that I'm with you. That's a whole new one that I haven't heard yet, and I'm gonna have to give that one some thought. That's kind of that in itself is a whole new level of scary, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Okay, Tyler. So I just want to stay there for just a minute. So you said it's a war for the soul. I agree with you. I've said this many times myself. But what does that actually mean? What are they trying to do to us ultimately? Are they trying to trap us somewhere, or what are your thoughts on that? What do they win by getting our souls? What's the agenda there?
Um, they win your soul, our DNA, and soul is a currency in the galaxy. I would say uh, it's the most highly sought after. I mean, we've seen Jupiter ascending, right? That's like that's probably they're referring to adrenochrome in that movie, but I do think that our blood, our DNA, our soul is a currency, and if they have your soul, that soul can be used to animate any vessel, whether it's a clone or another body in another reality or parallel timeline. I mean, who knows what the possibilities are? Also, it keeps you from ever remembering who you are. If your soul is fragmented a million different ways, and you have all these soul fragments out there all over the place in different bodies, by the time you get through the healing process and remember who you are, like it's just a less likely chance for you to actually evolve or ascend, I think. So there's like it's a win-win-win. There's a million different benefits for them, the perpetrators, right? But ultimately for us, it's reclaiming our power, and it forces us to go on that journey too. So it's in a way that the dark serves the light, but it's I don't think it's black and white. There's a lot of gray area there, and I think there's basically all of the above. Any number of reasons could be possible for it.
And then when you say they, who are you referring to if they want our souls or there's a war for our souls? Who's the they in that equation?
Oh man, um, the Draco reptilian royal bloodlines, the elitist that we don't know their names. We don't know who they are. Um, it's anyone's guess, but I would say the controllers, right? Um, and it could be lower level too. Like, I was listening to, I forgot what her name is. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but talking about the whole Illuminati the ritual deaths is because whenever they have a ritual death, they can capture the soul. They can ensure, like, they maintain control of the soul during a ritual death, and then they can use that soul to do their dirty work in the fourth dimension, in the astral realm, and reanimate another body with that soul. And so it could even be used at lower level by, it can be done by lower level Illuminati members just performing rituals. I mean, I think, you can just keep going up the ladder, and each level has its own reason for doing it. But at the very top, I mean, it's anyone's guess who's really, the dark force that's running things. But I think, the Sakar, the Draco reptilians. I mean, I know that's like kind of a stretch for some people, but I really do believe something like that is taking place.
Wow. Okay. So where did you go from there? So you had your first, sleep paralysis is what people call it, but we all know what you mean. And then you had some shadow people and then some other experiences after that. So what happens after this incident where you stayed up all night, you called out of work? I know we kind of skipped to where you were trying to figure out what was going on, but what happens directly after this, if anything?
Well, that's whenever, I mean, it's a long story, but for the most part, I started realizing that there was something I could do about it, and I'll try to put it in a nutshell. But I accidentally started lucid dreaming, and what I mean by lucid dreaming was I realized at one point I could like fast forward and rewind my dream and like control my avatar and in the dream in that reality and understand that I was dreaming, and then I could wake myself up at any time, and I was like, so I became like fully conscious in the dream. You're lucid dreaming, and that's whenever I started noticing um, there would always be like somebody, something out of place in my dream that would always be getting closer to me. It would somehow find its way to me. If anybody's seen the movie It Follows, the guy who wrote that movie actually had very similar experiences to me because I looked it up after I saw that movie. I'm like, this dude fucking knows what's going on. And I looked it up, and because that movie was exactly what I was experiencing. But in the movie, it happens in like the 3D. But take the plot of that film and apply it to the astral realm, to the dream state, and that's what's going on. So these this thing would just slowly make its way to me in the dream, and by the time it got to me and touched me in the dream, I would wake up paralyzed with this thing on top of me, and I would be at war fighting for my life. And it finally occurred to me one time, I would actually, it finally occurred to me one time just to wake myself up before it got to me. I'm like, you know, you're dreaming, just wake yourself up. So I would see it's this guy, this like very tall man in the dream. He had like overalls on, and he was like coming after me, and I was running from him in this house, and I hid in this closet, and he opened the closet door and like reached for me, and I woke myself up. I'm like, wake up, and I just woke myself up, and as I woke up, there was a shadow person standing next to my bed, getting ready to climb on top of me, and I saw him. It was like he was almost physically manifested. It was crazy. And there was no facial expression. It was just a figure, like a silhouette. And you could feel, like, I couldn't see his facial expression, but I could feel his expression. And he was shocked. Like, he was shocked. He was not expecting me to wake up. So I woke up and saw it, and it scared me, and I scared it, and it took off and like glided out of my room, like just like floated right around the foot of my bed and out the door. And I was like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "This isn't. This is like okay. So it's not just a nightmare. There's actually like something in my room. Like this is in the dream world, but it translates to this reality." And then you look into like shadow people and ghosts and stuff, and it does take like so many electrons that actually make them manifest into this reality. So when you see a ghost, they are somewhat measurably physical. So it's really interesting, but that's a different rabbit hole. And I was just like, holy shit, like these things are real. So the next time it happened, I started paying more attention in my dreams, and I could see the moment of penetration. And when it would like come into my dream, there would be like this little glitch, and I could tell, and I would see this thing at a distance. And so I would wake myself up before it got to me, and I would do a clearing, and I was able to stop it. And I was like, oh shit, it worked. But then uh, they started getting tricky, started getting clever. I say like a velociraptor testing a fence, they'll never test the same place twice. Well, that's what happened. Then they started cloaking. No, they started showing up as deceased loved ones. So I would see like my mom in my dream, and I think it was her, but it was just them with the trickster energy, appearing, taking the form of her. And when she would like get close to me, that's when I would wake up being attacked again. And then after I was on to that, then they became invisible, and that was a whole thing I had to figure out. Then they turned into animals. Then they turned into solid objects. After every time I would figure it out, they would adapt, right? So then they turned into solid objects, and the first time they did that, it was like this clock, like this grandfather clock in the dream that I was just like, I had to go investigate. I'm like, oh, what's this clock? That's amazing looking. And I go and touch the clock, and boom, like I'm under attack in bed again. So it's like they have all these different ways, and they're relentless. Then I learned about the psionic abilities that the CIA actually trains people to do, and it's a psionic ability called dream walking. You and I can do it. Anybody can do it. You literally, what you do is you basically leave your body and you astral project into other people's dreams. And the way they train you to do it is to imagine like you're hovering above a neighborhood, and everybody's house has little bubbles above the house, and each bubble is the individual's dreams in that home. And basically you can just cruise down the street in your astral body, and then you just basically choose which bubble you want to penetrate, which dream you want to infiltrate. And that's a real ability that is being taught by our intelligence agencies. So if the intelligence agencies, if we can do it, then other entities certainly can do it. So we're talking like a whole other level here of this dream walking, which I didn't know was a thing until, I don't know, a few years ago. But it just was incredible, and it's just been like this whole. I almost look at it now as training. Like it was just like every time it was like, okay, I'm leveling up. Okay, what can I do now? Until eventually, it's like almost all but stops now. I mean,
Oh
it's
my
all
gosh,
stopped.
Tyler. You have no idea. You're recounting the story of my life right now. I thought it was super cool too. I thought I was leveling up and I thought I was getting all this awesome training when I realized I could actually beat them at their own game, and then they actually quite quickly showed me otherwise. But anyway, I know exactly what you're talking about with these dream scenarios and the testing that's going on there. Very interesting. And I love that we're actually training people to do it. So wow. Okay, and so what's the next thing?
So during that period of my life, oh man, there's a lot, but I'll just jump into this. I used to carpool. Well, I'll tell you basically what happened. Somebody tried to recruit me to into the Mars programs, and I didn't know what it was and didn't believe in any of that stuff at the time. This was 2017. What happened was I worked with this guy. His name's Larry. He We used to carpool together. He lives a couple exits away from me, local to me. We used to carpool, work together. We were friends. He was, older than me, but we still got along. And whatever. We just carpooled and hung out, and I had known him for years. And we worked together, but we were in construction, so weren't always on the same job site. Well, one day I've heard from some people at work, like, did you hear what happened to Larry? I'm like, no. Like, he got escorted off the job by government vehicles that came in like black SUVs and took him away in handcuffs. I'm like, really? I'm like, what happened? That's crazy. And nobody could get a hold of him. His phone was off, and it was just anyone's guess what happened to him. So I he started, about a month went by, and he started posting all this crazy stuff on Facebook that was out of character for Larry, talking about crazy stuff. He was like, Donald Trump is our savior. He carries the Christ consciousness. Obama's the Antichrist. He said Princess Diana is still alive, living in an underground city. They use clones to act out the event. He was talking about like how all their weather was controlled, and basically, he kept making posts about going to Mars. He's like, me and Andy are going to go to Mars one day, without just like weird stuff. People literally were like thinking he was going crazy, and I forgot, there was so many things he was posting about at the time, but it was, and um, uh, posting stuff about the Clintons being murderers and stuff like that. But and it was just really interesting. So everybody at work, he became like the talk at the break table at work. Everyone was talking about how crazy Larry was, but I didn't really want to partake in the slandering because he was my friend, and I just didn't. I didn't want to do that. But anyway, so that's going on. And one morning I woke up and I decided to. A video popped up on my phone about spending time in nature. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take my dog to the park this morning. So I had never taken her to walk in the park. I just walk around the neighborhood, and I took her to the barracks where I grew up. And it sounds like a weird park to want to go to, but it just felt like home to me. And the trail is literally right across the street from the airfield, And so I just pulled into, there's like four different parking lots I could have chosen. I just pulled into one of them, and I parked, and I looked over, and Larry is sitting there in his truck. And I hadn't seen or heard from him since he was escorted off the job at work, and he was sitting there in his truck, and I'm like, uh, I said, Larry, and he goes, you showed up, and I said, what do you mean I showed up? And he goes, you don't think you ended up here by accident, did you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And we got out of the car, and I'm like, what happened to you at work? And he's like, we got to be careful. I have to be careful what I say because they're listening to me right now. I'm like, who's listening to you? He's like, see that guy by a tree? He has an earpiece in. He's a federal agent. He's been following me all morning. I'm like, and I look over, and this guy's like stretching like by this random tree, and like he's adjusting earpiece right at the time he says that. I'm like, what is going on, dude? Like, what happened to you? He's like, I threatened to. He's like, I threatened to kill. I threatened to murder Obama and Hillary Clinton for being murderers and pedophiles, and I was like, yeah, but like you threaten them, but everybody threatens politicians. Like, how was your threat taken seriously? And he didn't say it, but he like pulled the newspaper article out and showed me, and like, that's just weird. I don't like you had to have done something else. Like, I really didn't understand what happened, but and then he's like, well, that guy, and he's like, it doesn't matter. They can hear us from the satellites anyway. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, there's satellites in low Earth orbit. They can zoom into anyone and hear anything they're saying. They don't need this agent. He's just there as a scare tactic. And he started telling me all kinds of crazy stuff about um, just everything. I mean, just it was more stuff about, I guess, like the Trump and the Hillary and Obama's and all that stuff, and just weird stuff. I'm like, where are you getting all this information from? He's like, I don't know. I just hear these voices in my head, and I just know things now. And I didn't know about voice to skull technology back then, and it was just blowing my mind. And he was just started telling me all kinds of stuff, and then he was telling me how he was chosen to go to Mars, and he was chosen to go to Mars because like he was told that the world was going to end in Labor Day of 2017, and like a select group of people were like chosen to go, and basically he was like there to try and get me to go with him. I'm like, dude, you must be crazy. Like, this is the craziest thing I ever heard. And so anyway, we had this conversation, and we parted ways. And I went to the following Monday. I came home from work, and he was in my driveway waiting for me. And basically, I have to cut this story short, but he spent an entire summer trying to recruit me to go to Mars, and it sounds crazy, but like he really like had some like crazy classified information that he started sharing with me to convince me that all this stuff was real, and he was explaining to me like the underground tunnel system and all the underground cities, and how the celebrities like frequent the cities, and a lot of the people that we think are dead aren't dead, and he starts telling me about the weather manipulation and how we control all the weather. And he goes, there's even people that can control the weather with their mind, and they can control the intensity of their weather with their emotions. And he's telling me about different timelines, like parallel timelines and stuff. And he said one way you can tell what's going on a different timeline is by looking at the video game covers. He said they like take the NHL game for example. They always have like an alternate cover that you vote for. He said that's not for fun. He goes, they don't always know which timeline is going to be on top. He said they don't know which one's going to be solidified, so they have the vote and make people think they're voting for the cover, but really it's the team like the alternate cover is the team that won the Stanley Cup on the other timeline, and oh man, what else was he telling me? Just, I mean, it was just going on and on about stuff like that. Oh, and in the time travel program that we've had, and because that's how apparently we were getting to Mars was through a jump room. Well, he told me about we had like we can go, we had the ships to leave the planet and go faster at the speed of light. But he said he taught me about jump rooms and jump room technology, and one night he finally wanted me to meet him. He called me in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. He's like, hey, can you meet me under the St. Francis Bridge? And St. Francis Bridge is an hour south of me. I found out later that the St. Francis Mountains is actually a deep underground military base there. And I'm like, what are you doing under St. Francis Bridge in the middle of the night? He's like, there's a woman here from the programs, and she wants to meet you. going to give us instructions on how to get to Mars. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to Mars, first of all. And he basically claimed that she was a time traveler here that was disguised as a homeless person. And he told me like a large percentage of the homeless people that are actually like time travelers waiting for their next mission. And he was, I mean, it was just the craziest shit. And I was like, dude, I'm not going to meet you in the middle of the night underneath a bridge to meet a
So
homeless.
Tyler, are you, sorry to interrupt, are you still, you're still thinking, oh, this guy's just batshit, right? Is there any part of you believing anything he's saying?
Both. So I definitely thought he was crazy, but I was also intrigued. And because he had an answer for everything. He had so much information. I'm like, how do you? I've known him for years, and it was like he was just like flipped on, turned on, switched on, or something like, and he just had all this information at the ready, and that's what intrigued me. And I didn't know about, like, it wasn't until after this I found out about Laura Eisenhower being recruited for the Mars programs, and that's whenever I looked back on this moment, like, wait, was that real? You know, and then he tells me, he's like, well, if you won't meet with this time traveler, will you talk to one? And I was like, yeah, if one calls me, I'll talk to her, sure. And so the next day, this girl like friend requests me on Facebook. She likes every single one of my posts, like to get my attention. She sends me a message. She goes, "Hey, you're Larry's friend." Oh, rewind a little bit. He told me that she wouldn't. He's like, whenever she reaches out to you, I was like, "How will I know it's her?" And he's like, "You'll know." And he's like, when she reaches out to you, you have to invite her to the Church of Scientology. You have to invite her to church. That's the code word. Otherwise, she won't talk. And so she reached out to me and said, "Hey, hey, I'm Larry's friend, blah blah blah," and like we started talking. And I never did actually invite her to church. I was so skeptical about this whole thing. And basically, it stayed at small talk. And I finally just said, "Are you a time traveler?" And she said, "LOL, what? No, I'm just friends with Larry." You know, she kept like dancing around it. So I told Larry, he's like, "Well, did you talk to her?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Did she say anything?" I was like, "No." He goes, "Well, did you use the code word?" I said, "No." And he got real mad. He's like, "I told you had to invite her to church or she's not going to talk to you." And he started getting super frustrated with me that I like wasn't complying. And then he started like thinking I was working for somebody because his wife had a restraining order against him. They took his kids away from him. He was homeless. He was living in his truck. He lost everything. Anybody that ever got close to him was something would happen to him. And by the way, every time he would come to my house and talk, black government vehicles would drive through the neighborhood. And my dog never barks at cars, and she would bark. She would howl at these black vehicles, and it was crazy. I'm like, dude, she's never barked at a car in my life, and she's barking at them. So anyway, all that happens with, I'm flying through a lot because this went on for months, and
No, no, I totally get it. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that's nothing to do with what you're saying, but maybe depending on what Larry what Larry said. Okay, what did Larry ever say about portals, if anything? Because I heard you say something about jump rooms.
yeah, he just said they have elevators that you just walk on an elevator on Earth and you get off an elevator on Mars. And he said that's how he goes. I don't know how it works, but that's how I can explain it. And and that was the first time I had heard of that. But now, after listening to testimonies and reading the Sands of Time series by Sean David Morton, which are must-read books if you're interested in the origins of time travel, that's very much how it works. They describe the technology as you're here, then you're just there. Like there is no like in between. You're just here and then there. That's basically how he described it to me. But I'll wrap this part of the story up. So he eventually one day I came home from work and my dog was out back, and I'm like, who let my dog out? And I walk in the house and Larry is sleeping on my couch. Like I'm like, Larry, what the fuck are you doing on my couch, dude? And he's like, sorry. He goes, I said, where's your truck? And he goes, oh, I parked it at Best Buy. I'm like, you walked here? He's like, yeah. I was like, why? He goes, well, they were following me. I'm like, they know you, like they know you come here. It's the worst place to hide. And he's like, by the way, I took a shower and all this stuff, whatever. He's like, well, this is the last chance. He's like, the ship leaves this weekend. And he would just say the ship, that's what he would call it. He was just like a metaphor. He'd be like, the ship leaves this weekend. And this was after he had already told me like how if I was gonna go, how I could pack a bag and bring like some bare necessities, like memorabilia, like photos of my family and stuff that I wanted to take with me. I could have one small backpack of stuff. And anyway, I didn't. I never did that. So I was like, dude, I'm not going. He's like, this is your last chance. I'm like, I'm not going. So he's like, will you at least take me back to my truck? So I took him to his truck. He got in Best Buy parking lot, and I said, and he got in his truck and he rolled his window down. He goes, I'll see you on the other side. I'm like, all right, I'll see you. And he's been a missing person ever since then. And he just disappeared off the face of the earth. So I don't know what happened to him, but it was the craziest thing.
Well, Tyler, he's on Mars.
All
Clearly,
right.
that's where he went. Okay. Did you want to follow up on that about him resurfacing or him missing?
No, so no, we can. I mean, we'll be on that subject forever. But if you want to move on, we can. But if you unless
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I was just wondering. So, what did he say was happening on Mars? So, this is essentially the Earth is going to be destroyed, and everyone, select people are moving to Mars. Is this, continuity of government? Is or how do you get chosen to survive? How did he choose you to go to Mars? What's happening on Mars? What's it
yeah,
look like? Who's there?
yeah. Great questions. So I did it. I was like, why me? Why me? And he said he couldn't say, but he was asked. He was told to ask me, and not told. It seemed like he was being more than told because he was adamant. And at one point, he got very suspicious of me, and he was like, "Who do you?" He thought I worked for somebody. He's like, "Who do you work for?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're the only person in my life that let me talk to right now. That I can't get close to anyone." And he's like, "What do you? Who do you work for? What do you know?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm like, you're lucky I'm even entertaining you, you know." So, but I did. So as far as why me, I don't know. Um, I do have a theory now, but we can get to that later. But the what's going on Mars? He told me that he was told that the world was going to end, and they were like trying to preserve the human race, and like certain people were being relocated to Mars, and he's like, it's going to be great there. There's going to be all kinds of women. And they told him that there was going to be like all kinds of women. You could have sex with as many girls as you want. Like, and apparently that's like the case. If you listen to these guys' testimony, there's brothels. Like, if you go to the moon and you're like working in the mines on the moon, like that's your incentive to keep working. Is there's like women waiting for you at the end of the day. It's your payment. And this is what I've heard through other testimonies, but that's what they were telling him. Like he really thought that like he was going to go live this life of luxury and have all the women that he wanted, and they like he was told that they were going to like be used, I guess, as some form of breeding program to just preserve the human race. And he was like, yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have all this sex. And I'm like, dude, you're nuts. Um, but who knows what happened.
Okay. Hiker Gal, do you have anything before we get to the next section?
No, I'm just taking it all in. This is this is something. Um, but I'm glad I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Nah, I'm good. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, Tyler. So what happens after? So he just kind of disappears, and didn't see him for a long time. It sounds like. So what happens after that?
After that, I would have my what I would call my awakening. I wasn't awake or aware to any of the stuff he was telling me about. But I didn't have any reference point for anything he was saying. And so it did sound crazy to me, really, looking back on it. And so many of the things that he told me about, I have since found supporting evidence in my research, and just interviewing whistleblowers and doing what we do. Um, so after that, I had my awakening, and that's when I started learning about all the programs and all that stuff. And I did have a girl come into my life who I believe was like a handler. Um, is a handler situation in the relationship, and I believe it was tied to the CIA. I don't have proof. I mean, I don't want to say too much about her because she's still a public name, But that was a whole thing in my life. And then right after that ended, um, well, while that was still going on, this guy approaches me. Somebody I know connected us. She's like, "You need to interview this guy. He has insane information. He's a whistleblower for the Navy." And I'm like, "Really?" And yeah, sure, put me in contact with him. And sure enough, this guy had like the most impressive information I had ever heard about like what's going on the ground, off planet, like like the whistleblower that you want. Like that was it. Like he had everything. He was like, it was almost too good to be true. And it was like, and we talked for like a year before I ever even interviewed him because he knew things about me that he shouldn't have known. And he like, it was almost like he had a file. And long story short, because this is another long story. It turns out he came into the community under the guise of a whistleblower, but he was really a warrant officer recruitment specialist for the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and he was tasked with recruiting gifted starseeds into the program. And I found that out because he admitted, because at some point he literally asked me to join. It was like, it wasn't like I had to guess. It was a whole like actual recruitment. He had spent a year grooming me essentially, introducing me to his family and his kid and all this stuff, and sharing all this information with me, and blowing my mind, just knowing things about me that he couldn't have known. And uh, it really wasn't for it wasn't good. At first it sounded exciting, but he eventually, we were talking one day, and he was like, "So, what do you think about joining one of these programs?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, were you trying to recruit me?" He's like, "What if I was? Would you do it?" I'm like, how does it work?" And he's like, "Well, would you do it?" I'm like, "I mean, how does it work?" We went back and forth, and because I didn't want to do it, but I wanted to know like what the process looked like. I wanted to see how far it went. I was like, "What would it look like?" He just basically, he said, "You'll get like a psych eval test, and they'll test your psychic abilities, and they'll run a bunch of tests, and if you pass, then we do what I call a bring your kid to work day, and I would bring you and introduce you to certain people." And it was actually a facility in Tennessee. I don't remember exactly where in Tennessee now, he said, but there's an underground facility somewhere in Tennessee. And he said that's where we would have to go for me to be brought in and all this stuff. And then he started asking me a series of questions, and all kinds of stuff that seemed random, but I knew what he was doing. And I was entertaining it. And the very last question was like, "What's the one thing you want more than anything in the world?" And I said, "Love." I said, "Love. I want to find my soulmate. I want to be in love and find my partner." And he's like, "Are you sure about that?" And he's like, "Why do you say love?" And whatever. I just explained why. And he's like, "Is that your final answer?" I'm like, "Yeah." Why? I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I know more than anything. Like, if I could have anything, I just want to be in love with somebody. And he said, "Well, because you realize you can't have both." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You can't join the program and be in a relationship. Like you just, it won't work." And I was like, "Well, then I don't want to do it." And he's like, "Well, don't." He's like, "Well, don't be surprised if you're tested in that area." And I was like, "What do you mean tested in that area?" He goes, "You'll see." And a week later, this girl comes into my life. We meet online, and like she lives in Australia, and we fell in love like head over heels for each other. Never met, but it was this crazy connection, and we both remembered each other from the programs. Like we just started unlocking all these memories and within each other, and it was crazy. And we actually, I actually, once I started talking to her, I became a targeted individual. Like I don't know how it happened, but like overnight things started happening to me. And I'll pause there because it's a long story, and I don't know where you want to go if you have any other questions.
No, yeah, I definitely want to hear that, the targeted individual. So there's a lot of overlap with the abduction community, with targeted individuals, with MK Ultra, with these programs, that you're referring to. I definitely want to hear about that part if you're okay discussing it.
Yeah, definitely. So while I was dating this girl, it was during the COVID time, and we couldn't fly to see each other because of the passports, and neither of us would get the vaccine, so we were kind of stuck, and it was like torturous because all we wanted to do was meet each other, which I think was like kind of part of the plan, like to keep us like it's like a loose farming thing. It's like you're almost like love sick, you know. And if you've ever read the book Love Bite by Eve Lorgan, Alien Interference and Human Love Relationships, that book is a must read. But it was something like that. And I started, let me think, because there was so much that happened. So yeah, that's what happened. He would always tell me that he had these, what he would call activation codes or remember codes. If I joined, like if I decided to join the program, like they would give me a code. And I don't know if you guys seen the movie American Ultra, where the girl walks into the store and like says the code out loud, the remember code out loud to the asset to get him like to trigger an alter to get him back online. It's exactly like that. He said you would just like it would just trigger an alter. It's already been done when you've been taken when you were younger. And he would always like dangle this code in front of me, but he's like you know, be careful what you wish for. Like if you don't know what'll happen if you're ever activated. And I was very fascinated by it, but I was like I kind of danced around it. So one day I decided to go to the park and Jefferson Barracks again, the same exact trail where I met Larry. I went to go. I was just walking, and I had heard about this Native American prison cell that was allegedly a portal, and I wanted to go check it out. Like people, I just heard stories about it. So it's a longer story than that. But anyway, I went to go investigate this, and the cell was open, the door was open, and I walked into the jail cell, and it was like a literal looked like a jump room, like it was like this weird wavy ripple in the room, and as I walked in, this like person walked out like literally through out of thin air. They just like manifested, and it was like more of a shadow person, but they were right there, and it was so real. And I watched them walk past me. I'm like, holy shit! And I could see this wave in this room, and I'm like, what is going on? And like all my spidey senses started going off. So I just got out of there and I walked back up to the trail. And there was this guy he fit the bill of a Fed, like just fit the bill. You know, he had dressed exactly like with the khakis and the collared shirt and the sunglasses and the earpiece. And he was like walking up to me on the trail. And I'm thinking he's going to like say something to me, but then he just keeps walking. And I'm like, that is just weird. So I get around to the other side of the trail and there's this little girl. There's a girl by herself. It's like spring. It's not even summer yet, but it's like just starting to get warm. And there's this little girl in this piece of like a playground equipment. It's like this wall you can climb up one side and down the other. It's kind of like a triangle, like a pyramid or whatever. And she's sitting on top of the wall. And I'm just like walking. I see her at the distance, and I'm like, where are her parents at? And I'm getting closer. I'm looking. I'm like, surely there's got to be some adults around. Like, why is this little girl not having parents? And I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and I'm walking up, and there's no adults around. This girl couldn't have been more than 10 years old, and she's standing on top of on this piece of equipment with like a COVID mask on, and she starts like she's looking at me, staring me right in the eyes, and she just starts saying, Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden, Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden, Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden. But it was a German accent. And she was like, it was a German accent. And I didn't even know what she was saying. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? I'm like, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. What are you saying? And she said, Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden. And I said, Missouri Botanical Garden? And she said, Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden. And like when she said it the last time, like it took my breath away. And I'm like, what the heck? And like I literally was like completely like in a trance. And I I didn't know what to do and I walked away. And then after I walked away, I realized like it never occurred to me to ask her where her parents were or anything. Like next thing you know, I'm like back in my car. And I go to my car and like my car had been gone through, nothing was taken. My seats were reclined, they were pushed back. Everything was done to my vehicle except even my wallet was in the car and they didn't take my wallet. Um, it was like they were just messing with me. So that night I go home, and I it was the first warm night of the year, and I was sat down on the couch to like turn a movie on. I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna go outside and just look at the stars. And I go lay on the deck, and I just, as soon as I lay down, uh, black triangle craft, a TR-3B, flies directly over my house, and I jump straight up to my feet. I'm like, holy shit! And like I didn't even think to grab my phone or anything. It's so real. I mean, it's no different than seeing an airplane. You know, we see these lights in the sky and all this stuff. And it was a completely silent craft of TR-3B. It was March 2nd of 2022, um, and this thing flies over my house, and it turns right over my house and like banks, and just goes off, heads east until it eventually just disappeared. And I finally told um, my recruiter, the guy, what happened, and I said, "What do you think that was? That that thing that girl told me?" He said, "Hang on, let me run it up the ladder." And whenever he said run it up the ladder, he just meant like ask, I guess, who's above him. And then he called me back, and it's a pre-code. And I said, what do you mean a pre-code? He's like, it's a pre-code to a remember code. He goes, sometimes they can be given to you in series to see how you'll react. But the thing was, that wasn't given to you from us. I mean, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that means there's like another organization trying to activate me. And he's like, exactly. and and I'm like, what the fuck is happening in my life right now? It's the craziest thing. And
And
eventually,
what are you thinking, Tyler? I mean, I get you're thinking what is happening right now, but what do you think is actually happening, or what pieces are you putting together at this point?
well, at this point I fully believed in. I knew the programs existed. I knew all this stuff was real. I had read the books, seen the movies, interviewed the people myself, to know that all of this stuff exists and is possible. And I just thought it was. I just couldn't believe it was happening to me. You know, we've interviewed the targeted individuals, and sometimes I thought they sounded a little paranoid, but then it was happening to me. You know, I'm like, oh, like this is it. You know,
Oh yeah, it's all fun and games until it starts happening to you, and you realize that maybe they're not as crazy as you thought. So when did you start your podcast?
February of 2019 was our first episode. And you know, we were growing. You know, we were pretty big until, you know, YouTube axed us, and we got removed off all platforms, including PayPal, Linktree, even Linktree. They took away our Linktree. You know, Venmo. We couldn't do everything. We had to start over, and now it's been really hard to gain traction since then. But um, yeah, so 29.
Well, at least you know you're being disruptive to some kind of system if they're taking you off of all those platforms. It's actually some type of feedback at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at this point, I mean, there's a lot going on. Like we would really be here forever if I was to go into every detail of like the craziness of what was happening. But one of the wilder things that happened at this time is I woke up one morning with right after this. I woke up with the memory of being brought to this facility, and I knew it was in Illinois. I don't know how I knew it was in Illinois. I'm in Missouri, right on the edge of. I'm in St. Louis, so I'm like right on the border, right by the river. For some reason, I knew it was in Illinois, and I had the whole memory of being brought into this facility in the middle of the night in these black SUVs and escorted around back into the basement, brought into this room where they testing people for their abilities. And there's a whole crazy story that would take forever to tell again. But I had this wild memory, and I woke up completely exhausted, and it was so, the memory was so real. I drew the buildings, I drew like the whole thing. I documented, I wrote it down, and I found out through a whole series of synchronicities. A friend, you know, I'll just skip that part, but I ended up figuring out it was a Boeing facility. My friend was telling me about an experience he had at a Boeing facility, and it clicked. I'm like, Boeing. I'm like, that's it. It was a Boeing facility. I know it was. So I got on Google, and I'm looking, and I find it. I find a Boeing facility in Illinois. I zoom in on it, and it literally, from the sky view, it looked exactly like what I remembered. Then I did the street view. I'm like, holy shit, these are the buildings. I'm like, wait, was I really taken here in the middle of the night? And by the way, in that memory was Mike was his name. He the recruiter. Like he was the one who brought me into the facility. It was him, and he brought me down and brought me to the basement. So I drove out there into the bowling facility and found it. I found the buildings where I was taken. I'm like, holy shit, this is it. I'm taking pictures. I'm like shaking. Like I'm like, wait a second. Like that wasn't just a dream. I didn't make that up. I'm like, okay. Now this is like I'm going from targeted to literally being abducted and brought into a facility in the middle of the night and brought back. And like, what to what end? You know, what is going on? And that was just a major revelation for me. That's what made it all real, actually. Like the whole, like you hear about people being like having memories come back and they don't know where, but whenever you like find the actual location that matches your memory, that's when like things get real. And it's just something I was never expecting to find. And
So did you end up talking to Mike about this? Did you ask him, you know?
yeah, he acted like he had no idea what I was talking about. And I was pissed because I could tell he was lying to me. You know how you just know somebody's lying? Like I could tell. And he literally acted like he had no idea what I was talking about. So um, it was right after, you know, after that I was planning my trip to Australia, and for something like for some reason it must have been a weird program. I always wanted to go to that park that I grew up at. I would always walk there. I'm always drawn to go back there. It's like I have a relationship with that place, and it's weird. So I would always go there and like walk and stuff, and so I was back there again, and I was. It was a week before I was getting ready to go to Australia to meet my girlfriend for the first time, and I'm just walking on the trail, and I break out. I start breaking out, and my left thigh starts breaking out in hives. Like I get this rash, just starts burning, like it's being cooked. I'm like, what the fuck? And I look down, and like my thigh is welting up, and I'm I'm like it's like itching and burning. I don't know what to do. So I'm starting to walk faster, but the sweat's making it worse, and it's like starting to spread. And shit, I'm just like losing my breath thinking about that. It was like I was like, what the hell is it? But then so there was this like white communications van in the parking lot and like I just it was weird. It just was out of place. And then so there's like a parking lot on each side of this trail. There's four different parking lots, and that van followed me. It moved parking lots every time I would turn the corner on the next part of the trail. That same van was in the next parking lot, and then the next parking lot, the next one. By the time I got home, the hives started spreading all over my body, and like full body hives. Like I don't know. I think I got hit with an energy weapon. I think there was that guy had an energy weapon in that van, and I know they can create anything they want. Like I mean, it's in the handbook itself. They can create rash, whatever. And it was such a bad case of hives. I thought I was going to have to cancel my trip to Australia, but through all the energy healers I know and just prayer and everything, I like finally got it all under control, and I was able to go on the trip, which the trip was a whole next level of targeting with her. And I'll pause there.
Wow, Tyler, this is pretty incredible. And all this starts happening to you in 20, you said in 2010, and now what year are we in now? Because you said mentioned COVID. And so what year did you go to Australia?
2022.
Okay, so interesting, 2022. So it's fairly recent that this is happening. Hiker Gal can talk to you about finding a place that she recognized from an abduction. Hiker Gal.
I sure can. It was in southeastern Colorado, close to the it was between Alamoso and the Great Sand Dunes National Park. There's a house and a barn that I was abducted, and taken to with a whole bunch of other people 6 months prior to me visiting this place. And if you look on my page, my banner photo is that actual site. And yeah, so it's a real thing. It's pretty much of a shock. when you realized, oh my God, this is real. But yeah, that happened to me.
Yeah, I mean it's real, and something else I'm just popped into my head. Occasionally he would like ask me a question. You can ask me anything you want. What do you want to know about yourself or anything? And I would always ask him random questions and stuff. And uh, another thing he was big into was like the portals and the jump rooms, and he explained a lot more in detail on how it works and stuff. But one of the times I said, okay, I woke up one morning with this voice in my head. It sounded like there was I had headphones on, and it said, "Remember this number 92720." And I said, "What does that mean?" It's such a random thing. I'm like, okay, you know so much. To see if you know this. And and he goes, "Hang on a second." And he's just typing, and he said 19720. He goes, "You heard it wrong." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "It's not 92720, it's 19720." I said, "What's that?" He's like, "It's a clone ID number." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm a clone?" He's like, "No, but you have clones." I was like, "What the fuck?" I'm like, "How many?" He's like, "From what I can see, three, and working in different programs right now. And you probably have memories bleed through from some of them." And just blew my mind. And I just don't know what to make of it. And he goes, one of them's even in a female body. He's like, one of them's just it's your consciousness, but it's in a female body. And just something I never really thought about possibly being the case for me, having the clones. So that was just another interesting side note.
Now, are you still in touch with this Mike guy? What's happening today? Well, let's get. There was one more story, I think, about Mercy Hospital. Did you want to discuss that? You might be on mute, Tyler, or we lost you.
Oh yeah, sorry, was yeah. There's a whole other part to that story that happens in Australia, but
Yeah, do
it's
you want to do? You want to go into that? And by the way, let us know when when you're getting short on time. I do want to let people come up and ask questions. People are welcome to come up and ask respectful questions. You don't have to believe Tyler, but you need to be respectful to Tyler, or I'll just boot you from the room. So if you're coming up to ask a question, please be mindful of that. Tyler, do you want to go into Australia? You want to go to the Mercy Hospital? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go to the Australia thing because it'll make the Mercy story make more sense, and I have plenty of time. Um, uh, so yeah, okay. Basically, I after that happened, I got on the plane to Australia, had a layover in Dallas. The flight in St. Louis was delayed an hour. Once we got to Dallas, the plane was getting ready to touch down on the runway, and it took back off. And I was already about to miss my layover anyway because the flight was delayed an hour, and we're about to touch down. And then, like literally, I'm looking out the window expecting the plane to hit the ground, and we all get like sucked back in our seats, and it takes off again. And the pilot comes on and says that there was a plane parked in the runway, and he had to take back off again and circle around, otherwise we would have whatever hit the plane. And then we circle back around, and then we get stuck in this traffic jam on the runway, and I barely make it, like by a split second, to my plane to Australia. Get to Sydney, Australia. My bags never made it. My bags never showed up. I missed my flight in Sydney because of that. Finally got to Brisbane where I was going, and my bags weren't there for 5 days. First night we were there, my girlfriend and I, she got attacked by what she says was a reptilian. The first night we slept together. I literally heard like footsteps come into the room, and I woke up and she was like being attacked by something, and we had to like do this whole crazy clearing. And it was like intense right off the bat. The next night we went to an Airbnb we were staying at, plugged in the GPS. It was like an hour away. We're driving, not even paying attention where we're going. You know how you do, you just follow the blue line on your phone and you're going. And we end up at a military base, and she's like, where are we? I'm like, how did we get here? We didn't even know. Like, I'm like, yeah, this isn't where we're supposed to be. And it was some air base or something. And so she turns around, and she pulls over and plugs in the GPS, and we're still a complete hour away from the Airbnb. Somehow we went an hour the wrong way and end up at this military base. We turn around, and like this jet comes, like this literal like F-18 comes like flying and does like a barrel roll right over the top of our car. Maybe coincidence. Anyway, it was like it like completely broke the barrier, like whatever the high deck or whatever you call it, and uh, and it was just weird. But then we noticed we were being followed by this car, and she's like a crazy intuitive psychic girl, and she was like this guy's following us, you know. I don't trust this car. And like sure enough, every turn we made, finally we pulled off into this town and ate lunch, and we he didn't follow us into town, so that was good. Plugged in the GPS again, and the address, it took us someplace in the middle of the woods. It was like a 45-minute drive, and it said you've reached your destination, and there was nothing around. We're like in this wooded road, and we're like, what the hell, like what is happening? And then we were still 45 minutes away from it again, and so we finally like triple checked, and then we make it to our Airbnb. We're going up the mountain, and we see a big sign that says military training grounds, and we booked our Airbnb in a military training grounds without even knowing it. And the first night we're in the Airbnb, I'm going to fall asleep, and every time I start to fall asleep, it feels like I'm getting electrocuted, like something's like zapping me back awake, and it like shocks my whole nervous system. And I gotta pee and get up, and and it kept happening. And she's like, "What is going on with you? Like, are you okay?" I'm like, I tried to explain to her what was happening, but she didn't really believe in all the targeting stuff and the weapons and all that direct energy weapons. And I'm like, I had to explain to her, I was like, literally every time I'm falling asleep, it's like somebody's sitting there with their finger on a button and pushing a button and shocking me. Like my whole body is getting shocked. And and she like it was to the point where like we didn't sleep all night. We were both on fumes. So the next day, we just make the best of it. Next night, it happens again, but even worse, to the point where I actually started having a heart attack. I started like going into shock. Like I actually was having a heart attack. Um, my chest tightened up. My whole left arm went numb. I'm like hyperventilating, and like she starts doing energy work on me and calms me down. And it was like a horribly traumatic night. But whatever this technology was giving me a heart attack. And then the following night, we we had this weird conversation that day about she had this whole theory that showers were used as portals, like for demonic entities. They can use the water, or the pipes, or whatever. And that's how they trap. Whatever. She was just telling me this whole thing. And we're getting ready for bed, and she's like, "Hey, babe, you gonna take a shower before bed?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." You know. And I got into the shower, and she's like, "Do you mind if I stay in here while you're showering?" And I'm like, "No, it's fine." So I shower and I get out, and she goes, she goes, "Did you scratch your back in the shower?" I said, "No." And she's like, "Look at your back." And I had claw marks down my back, like, like three, like, like three claw marks, not four or five, it's just three. And like clear red claw marks. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm like, holy shit, because I didn't even feel it. And she's like, I told you showers are portals. And she like did a clearing or whatever. And we went to bed, and we were laying there like about 11 o'clock at night. We'd fallen asleep. And as I was falling asleep, I don't know if she was sleeping or not, we heard the loudest explosion, just boom, like this crazy explosion. Didn't know what it was. We're like, hello, hello. It sounded like somebody was even like walking through the house. And like we finally get up and look through the whole house. And then it wasn't until I opened the bathroom door to see that the entire glass shower, it was like one of those big glass showers, the whole thing spontaneously combusted, and there was a million pieces of glass all over the floor. And she's like, "That's it." She goes, "We are not fucking staying here another night." And she's like, "How are we going to explain this to the Airbnb owners?" And she's like, "I told you showers are fucking portals." And we're like getting into this whole argument. And then she was like, "Who are you?" She's like, "Are you like some sort of plant? Like, what are you?" Who? She literally started thinking that I was like somebody like coming into her life to like destroy her life. I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, no, I have no idea what's happening to me right now. It was horrible. And I mean, I could go on and on about the trip, but when I was leaving Australia, I was stopped by two men in suits at the airport, and they pulled me aside and like, hey, you didn't finish filling out your man, what did they call that form? Some sort of form for traveling overseas. I don't immigration. I don't remember what the form was, but I'm like, really? I'm like, I filled out everything, and like, no. And so they literally pulled me aside and they had me like fill out this form on this iPad, basically just all basic information that they already had. Didn't make any sense, but I'm like, I'm not going to miss my flight home. And they sat there with me and watched me fill this whole form out, and then they let me go, and then you can get on the plane. So I got on the plane, which is it was weird anyway. I get on the plane, make it to LA. My flight in LA is canceled. I have to wait 12 hours in the LA airport. I finally go to get on the plane, and they said that the birthday on my plane ticket doesn't match the birthday on my passport, and they couldn't let me on the plane, and it was a whole thing. Finally get home, and when I finally got home and I opened up my bag, my computer was broken in half, and then I come home and my dog's collar was missing. When I got back home, and I asked my dog sitter, I'm like, you know what happened to my dog's collar? And he was like, no, I was wondering what happened to it too. I'm like, that's weird. I've had her for 10 years. She's never lost her collar. And I, so I look everywhere, can't find it. I buy her a new collar and put it on her. The next morning I wake up and she's like, yeah, I wake up to her like licking my face, and I'm petting her, and when my eyes are still closed, and I notice she's missing her collar again. And I'm like, don't tell me, like, you lost her. Like, how did she lose her new collar? And I looked all over the house for it, and I couldn't find it. I finally opened a bedroom door that had been closed all night, and the collar was sitting in the middle of the bed that was in the room that was closed all night. It's like, how is that even possible? Unless like they can walk through walls, and which they can do apparently if you read the CIA declassified documents. And this just kept going on and on until I finally, like, I broke up with my girlfriend because it was just becoming miserable for both of us. The moment I broke up with her, the targeting stopped. All of it. All of it stopped.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, actually there is more to that story. I forgot. Let me take a drink real quick. So I got back from after that happened. I was so mad. My girlfriend and I were arguing, pissed at each other, and it was just horrible. But we like really were like in love with each other. But it was just why we were trying to make it work is beyond me. Um, but we were, and like I was gonna move to Australia. It was this whole thing, but it was like who knows, mind control for all I know. But I was so pissed and whatever, and um, yeah, so that's what happened. I broke up. No, I didn't break up with her yet. We were pissed after an argument. I was pissed after an argument. I called Mike. I said, screw it. I said, give me the activation code. I said, give me the code. He goes, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. I said, just give it to me. Fuck it. And I was in like such a bad mood. And he goes, okay. And he goes, I'm warning you. He goes, I can't. I don't know, or you don't know what this means. What could happen? And I was like, I don't care. I said, just give it to me. Screw it. If this is all real, I want to know what it's about. And he reads this code 3 times in a row. And again, it took my breath away. Like I like took my breath away. And I had to hang up the phone because I didn't know what was happening to my body. And I started like shaking, like uncontrollably shaking, and I was like panicking, and I didn't know what was going on. And I realized after like a day or two what was happening to me. It completely it activated an altar that was very like I felt like all I wanted to do was fight. I felt like I knew how to fight. I felt like I could just like take out a whole room of guys. Like that's like I was like all of a sudden watching these like CIA movies and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I've done this. I know how to do this. Having all these thoughts, and it shut off my emotional center. Like I had no emotions. I fell out of love with my girlfriend overnight. Like I just no feelings for her anymore. We're gone. And then she was like, "What happened? You changed." And I'm like, "No, I didn't." She goes, "You don't mean it when you say you love me anymore." And I'm like, "No, yeah, I do." I was like trying to like lie about it, but I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it anymore because I just literally couldn't feel anything. and I was like completely like agitated and angry, and I was it activated some form of like super soldier type of alter, and I was like started. I was so mad at him at first for giving it to me, but then I was even more mad at myself for doing it because I thought I had just like signed my ticket to death, you know. And I eventually realized, okay, like I understand the healing process. I understand the healing journey. All this did was highlight another aspect of me that now needs to be addressed and healed. And I can actually, this is a good thing because I can heal that and integrate it. You know, I was like, I had to come up, I had to talk myself into some way to heal it. But during that period, it was like I was a person, a version of me I didn't know. I was a person I did not know, and I was scared because I didn't want to go around people because I didn't want people to notice that I was different and acting different. And I even signed up and started taking some martial arts, kung fu, black dragon kung fu, and the guy who was training me actually happened to train the elite special forces in the military, and like it was just this whole weird thing. And I finally once I really just went on this like inner healing journey, and I was able to like get like I guess heal that aspect of myself, and finally like started feeling my heart again and started like feeling emotions again, and it was like a very powerful thing for me eventually once I healed it. But I never it never occurred to me that code was going to do that.
And how are you able to heal from that, Tyler?
It's all psychological. You have to believe that you can heal. You have to understand that all that is, it's not anyone else, it's me. It's a fragment of my mind that however it was created, however it was fragmented, I just felt like I could reintegrate it and reheal and just heal whatever trauma was involved with that. And it was just through like booking sessions with, Reiki healers and energy healers that I knew, and through meditation, and I did parasite cleanses and like detoxes, and I was so scared. I was so scared that I was never going to be me again, that like I just, it was the only thing I cared about was getting back to being me again, because I didn't like who I was. I didn't like that person at all, because such a loving person. I love animals, and I just, my answer to the question was more, what do I want more than anything, was love. And all of a sudden, I couldn't love. I couldn't feel like anything, and it was the scariest feeling ever. But I understand that's how they program these soldiers, so there's no remorse on the battlefield. It's like they program your fight or flight out of you, so you can just kill and not care, and that's kind of what it felt like.
And how long did it take you to heal from that?
Months, probably months, maybe even longer by the time I really felt like myself again. But um, it months, I would say.
Okay, so I think we're coming up to this recent Mercy Hospital experience.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions before that?
Yeah,
Because that's a
Hiker Gal, did you want to jump in? I'm definitely going to open it up to questions, probably right after the Mercy Hospital.
No, not right at this moment. The clone having different clones is pretty interesting because I'm pretty sure I do too. But no, not at this point. Let's hear about Mercy.
Okay, so this was very recently, October, um, and I think might be the end of all this stuff too. Well, maybe not, but we'll see. So I was asked to speak at a conference specifically on the history of the secret space program, just because we've researched it so much, and the woman hosting the conference, she really wanted to. There's a lot of MUFON people at this conference, and she wanted me to bring that information to that crowd. So that's what I did. I put together a presentation on the secret space program, went to Springfield, Missouri, and attended this conference. So actually, let me um, rewind just a little bit. So a couple months prior to that, I had this weird recall. I remember being at this military base in a smoothie cafe on base of all places, And anyway, it's a whole long memory I had. I was telling my friend about it, and he said, "That sounds like Fort Leonard Wood you're talking about." I'm like, "Fort Leonard Wood?" I'm like, "Where's that?" He's like, "It's 2 hours from here in Missouri." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, He goes, "I can take you there. I deliver there." And I was like, "Yeah, let's go. I'd love to see if it matches my memory, you know." And so then right after that, my grandfather passes away, and at his celebration of life, I see on the table that he was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. I didn't know that. I'm like, "Oh shit, this is like right away. This is synchronicity. Like my grandpa was stationed here." And then right after that, uh, this random TikTok video pops up on my phone of James Casbolt talking about he was trained as part of the super soldier program. He's from Britain, mind you, but part of his training required him to go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and train with the elite special forces in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I'm like, okay, this is the third synchronicity in a row. Then I'm going to this conference, and I'm on my way, and I still hadn't even looked up exactly where Fort Leonard Wood was. And on the way to the conference, sure enough, I pass the damn army base, Fort Leonard Wood. Like I passed the exit. I'm like, oh shit, this is where it's at. And I almost stopped, but I didn't want to be late. So I just kept going. And get to the conference, and there's this guy setting up, one of the vendors setting up his table with all the used books. And one of the books he has is stamped property to U.S. Army. And I pick up the book, and it's called Interstellar Travel from 1979. And I said, "Where'd you get this book?" And he said it was actually from the U.S. Army Library. And he goes, it was discarded from the library. They took it out of circulation. And he goes, I just happen to know the guy who had the books that they pulled out of the Army Library. And I was like, how much you want for it? He's like, $5. I'm like, this is crazy. He's like, yeah, open it up. And I did. And he's like, it's all over stamped inside of it. It was like discard, 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 discard. And mind you, it's a book from 1979. It was actually property of Fort Worth, Texas, Dallas Fort Worth, Texas Army base, and it was discarded. And this is 1979, but the entire book is on interstellar travel, time travel, parallel universes, parallel realities, dimensions, extraterrestrials, all as matter of fact. Like it's just there. Like it never had to be a conspiracy theory. The book is right there. You know what I mean? And it was U.S. Army. I'm like, this is crazy. This is no coincidence that I got this book. And then um, the first night at the conference, I couldn't sleep at all. I was up all night. Like I was wired. I'm like, why can't I sleep? This sucks. Or I literally didn't sleep. And so the next day I was running on fumes. I told this girl that was at the conference, I was just like, yeah, I didn't sleep at all. I feel like shit today. And she's like, yeah, it's a bummer. And then later she comes up to me and she goes, here, she goes, you should take this tonight. It's a CBD gummy. It'll help you sleep. And she goes, you'll sleep for like 8 or 9 hours, and you won't wait. You'll wake up feeling great. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. She goes, they're amazing. I take them every night. I'm like, and she gave me one, and I just took it. Moral of the story: do not take a random gummy handed to you by a stranger at a conference. Um, so that night there was like a ghost hunt. It was like a at the conference they were doing a ghost hunt, and this woman comes up to me. She's like, she goes, I don't mean to freak you out, but there's like a figure standing behind you, and he's connected to the army. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, I don't know what it means, but I just keep seeing U.S. Army, U.S. Army. And he's like, not like hurting you, but he's like monitoring you. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's interesting. So before I take that gummy and before bed, and I go to my hotel room, well, I start having an allergic reaction to the gummy, and my throat closes up, and I stop breathing. Um, I have a tree nut allergy, and I carry oil of oregano with me because it helps extract the poison out of you. Once you have an allergic reaction, it helps extract it from your body. And I've learned that through, it's a whole long story how I learned that. I figured that out, but it's amazing. And luckily, I had brought the oil of oregano with me because I was laying in bed. My dad was in my hotel room, which he wasn't even supposed to be in the hotel room. It was a whole miracle why he ended up in my hotel room because I stopped breathing. I literally I told my dad, I was like, "Are you awake?" And he's like, "Yeah." And it's like something. He's like, "What's wrong?" He could feel it. And I was like, "I think my throat's closing up." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And like in that moment, my throat started closing up, and within seconds, it sealed up. I couldn't breathe. And like luckily, for some reason, I had like set out my oregano oil on the dresser, and I knew exactly where it was, and like ran over and I started just like dumping it down my throat, and it was working. Like it was giving me a airway. It was giving me a passage like to breathe, but it was still closing up like almost as fast as as I was taking it. And my dad's like, he's like, "Do you need the EpiPen?" I'm like yeah, like I'm trying to like signal to him, yeah, and he's like panicking, running around the bedroom, trying to like find his truck keys because the EpiPen was in his truck keys that his girlfriend accidentally left in his truck. It was crazy how we even had an EpiPen. He runs to the truck, comes back. By the time he gets back in the room, I'm like not breathing. I'm going into anaphylactic shock. He jabs the EpiPen into my thigh and calls the ambulance. And I'm at this point, I'm fully seizing. My body, I've lost control of my body. I'm just seizing. And the ambulance comes. They take me. They as soon as I get onto the ambulance. By the way, apparently there was THC. There was some THC in this gummy, so I was also like in a heightened state, I guess you could say, on top of like almost dying. Um, so I get onto the ambulance, and the guy in the ambulance, like he didn't even seem human. He looked like a synthetic, like an NPC. I just immediately I remember looking in his eyes, and it looked like he had cameras behind his eyes. Like I swear, it was the craziest thing. I'm like, what is going on? And they put me in the ambulance, and they give me the IV, and they give me Benadryl, and then uh, he starts putting something else into me. I'm like, what is that you're giving me? Because at this point I'm breathing again and stuff. And he's like, sodium pentothal. And I know what sodium pentothal is. It's a truth serum. I mean, I know that from interviewing people, whistleblowers and stuff, who've been given it to remember, to talk whenever they want you to talk. And I said, what? I said, what did you say? He goes, sodium pentothal. I said, why are you giving me that? He goes, so you don't freak out. And I'm like, freak out. And it did, like, basically in no time, I just black out. Like by the time they give me the Benadryl and the sodium pentothal, that's the last thing I remember. No, actually, he started asking me questions first, and he was like, "So, what was your presentation going to be about?" And I'm like, the history of the secret space program." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, okay. And what's that?" And like trying to explain it to him, and I just pass out, which I thought was weird. He was asking me about that anyway. And then I wake up, and I'm in a wheelchair, but I'm like barely, I'm like half out of it, and I know I'm in the basement somewhere, but I don't know where. And then I pass right back out. The next thing I know, I wake up and I'm in the emergency room, and they're wheeling me to like to the front desk in the emergency room, and I see my dad walking in the door. I guess he parked in a different entrance or whatever, and or a different parking lot. And I was so confused because I had gotten in the ambulance, and the next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. Like there was just this whole missing time, and I didn't. I looked at my dad and I said, "Was I in the basement somewhere?" And like I was so out of it and so confused. I was like groggy and stuff. And he said, "A basement? No. What do you mean?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then they wheeled me up to the table, to the desk, and they put the O2 sensor on my finger. And as soon as they did that, I had this whole flashback, this memory of being in the basement of this facility, hooked up to a lie detector. And you know how when you're on a lie detector, they put a thing on your finger? That's what triggered the memory. And I'm like, I'm having this like flashback. I'm like, was I guess I looked at my dad. I was like, was I on a lie detector? He's like, lie detector, what? And I was like, I need you to tell me right now everything that just happened. And he's like, what don't you remember? I said, tell me right now everything that just happened. And like I'm panicking at this point. And he's like, well, they need to ask you some questions first. I'll tell you in the room. So they start asking me at the desk like everything that happened. I'm like, yeah, I took this gummy that somebody gave me, and I started having an allergic reaction. And they're like, an allergic reaction, okay. Like they were being like almost condescending. And my dad was like, No, he really did. Like his throat. My dad had to vouch for me. They didn't believe me. He was like, "No, I watched my son stop breathing. His throat closed." Like, and they're like, okay, okay, okay. It's like I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. It's like they didn't believe me. The whole thing was weird. So I get into the next room and they hook me up to the EKG. They put like a million patches on me, and and they just they take a bunch of blood. They draw a whole bunch of blood from me without even asking me. I guess they had to do blood work because whatever. And this nurse walks in the room, and she's wearing purple scrubs, and she has like this. Her hair's up in this bun, and her name tag just says the letter K. But when she walked in, I swear to God, and this is the part like if I hadn't lost you already, I could lose you here. But I saw her, like I saw the human form, but I saw her like overlay like a Lyran ET, like a cat, like a Lyran ET. And I looked at my dad when she walked in the room, like see if he saw it too, and like it was like so prominent, like I could see like it's almost like the true version of her. You know how like we're apparently star seeds and we're from other places. Like I could see like she was like a Lyran, like it was like a feline being. And she comes in and she like hops up onto the desk, it hops up onto the counter, and she's like kicking her legs and stuff. And my dad looks at me, he thought it was like completely unprofessional. And she starts asking me questions, and she's like all bubbly and like and happy and like didn't fit into anything. And she eventually leaves, and my dad's like, "That was the most unprofessional thing I've ever seen a nurse do." I was like, "That's because she was an alien." He's like, "What?" And I told him what happened. He's like, "I almost believe you because that was so weird." And that part of the story will make more sense later. So then I get to the next room. They take us to the waiting room, and we're in the waiting room, and the Kelly Clarkson show is on TV. We're just sitting there waiting, and I'm looking at the TV, and Kelly Clarkson is interviewing Kate Blanchett, and Kate Blanchett had reptilian eyes, like I could see the slits in her eyes. And I said, "Dad, do you see that?" And he's like, "See what?" And like, "Do you see like the slits in her eyes, like she like the reptilian slits? You know, the videos we see online. Is like her eyes look exactly like that." And he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Dude, I'm looking right at it." I was like, "You can't see that?" And he's like, "No." And I don't know why I'm seeing it, but I see it. And uh, then she smiles, and I could like see like fangs, and I could see the same thing with her. Like she had a reptilian overlay. I'm like, "Oh shit, Kate Blanchett's a reptilian." And I'm like, "This is wild." And then like it goes, and then like I'm telling my dad what I'm seeing, and then out of nowhere they put the word shapeshifter on TV, and my dad looks at me. He goes, "No way." I said, "I told you." He goes, "Why did that word just pop up on the TV?" I said, "I don't know, but I told you." And he's like, that is crazy." He's like, "Why would they just pop up the word?" They said they popped the word on the TV and said shapeshifter. And and I'm like, "This is nuts." And then they went like another girl came on to be interviewed, and she didn't have she wasn't a reptilian, but I could see devil horns. Like she was wearing like devil horns, and it wasn't like I got this weird download. Like she didn't sign the oath. She didn't take the oath yet, but she wanted to be one of them. She was like in it for fame, and she hadn't like been initiated yet. And there's like this whole weird thing. Anyway, so that happens, and I look over. By the way, on the floor in the floor that we're on in the hospital, there was a bunch of armed police and army military. And when I looked over, there was a guy in the army hat, and he walks around in the army hat and looks at me and smiles. And I nudged my dad and I said, "See that?" And I was like, "Look at that! He's wearing the army hat." He's like, "That's crazy. That's weird." So then they come around the corner and they said, "Koala." It's my last name. And my dad's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, this way." And she takes off down the hall and doesn't wait for us. And my dad's like looking, and he grabs all his shit, and he's fumbling his shit, and he grabs my stuff, and he's trying to get the wheelchair unlocked so he can like go like follow this woman. And she just takes off down the hall, and she's so far ahead of us. She hits the buttons like on the wall to open the door. By the time we got through the doors were closing, and the doors slammed closed and hit the wheelchair and like knocked me sideways. And she never even looked back. And my dad looks at me. He goes, "This is unbelievable." "Do you see this?" He goes, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." And I said, "I told you this whole situation isn't normal." And we get to the next room. She puts me in the bed. They hook me back up to the EKG, all the stuff. And the room we're in is all glass, and there's a camera on the ceiling. And my dad's like, "Why is there a camera?" And he goes, "Where are we at? Like, what room are we in?" He's like, "Be careful what you say." I'm like, "I don't even give a shit anymore." And I'm like, "This is gonna sound weird." The one nurse left, and I said, "This is gonna you might not believe me." I hadn't told my dad what I thought happened yet. I said, you might think I'm crazy, but I think I said, first of all, I said, "Was I ever alone without you?" While since we left the hotel, I'm like trying to just like get my memories in order. And um, he said no. He goes, only on the ambulance. And I said, that's it. I said, and I told him what happened. I said, I think I was taken and then interrogated and brought back and since we've been here. And he's like, I would. He goes, I believe you. He goes, this is the craziest thing I've ever experienced. And then the new nurse walks in the room, and she goes, "So, you surprised at what y'all saw out there?" In like this country accent. And I said, my dad and I looked at each other and like, I said, "What do you mean surprised at what we saw out there?" And she got like kind of nervous, and she goes, "Oh, I just meant the crowd in the waiting room." And I'm like, I didn't even notice a crowd in the waiting room. Like, and um, she was like, "Yeah, how you doing?" Whatever, just basic nurse stuff. And I said, "Is there any way I could get um, paperwork on what they gave me in the ambulance?" And she just goes, "We don't have record of that." And I said, "You don't have record of what they gave me in the ambulance? Like, how do you know? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, how would you know? Make, whatever." I didn't have to explain it to her. Like, it just didn't make sense. She's like, "Yeah, we don't have record of that. You have to call whatever." They eventually let me go, and I walked out of there eventually on my own 2 feet at the end of the night. And oh yeah, rewinding back to the looking at the reptilian on TV, the Kelly Clarkson show. Like, I was seeing like the movie They Live, like the subliminal messaging coming through the TV, like that's always there. And there was this message that was being played on repeat over and over underneath the TV, and I could hear it and see it on the screen, but my dad couldn't see it. And it was saying, "Create new memories, create new memories, create new memories." And so anyway, we get back to the hotel, and I'll stop there if anybody has any questions. And then,
Okay, so what do you think this incident? What's your interpretation of what happened? This incident, the Mercy Hospital incident.
yeah, so that's where I was going next. So Margie Kay is a very talented remote viewer. She's the one hosting the conference. She's helped the she's helped the FBI, whoever, find over 70 missing people now with her remote viewing skills. She's very well known, and I told her, I started telling her about what happened. She didn't know anything that happened. It was the next morning, and she's like, Your dad said you went to the hospital. Are you okay?" And I started telling her kind of the story, and she said, she like, her breath was taken back. She goes, "You were taken." And I said, "I was." I said, "How'd you know?" She goes, "Do you mind if I view it?" And I said, "No, please." And she's like, "Give me your hand." And she closes her eyes, and like I hold her hand, and she's like, "First thing I'm hearing was not a normal hospital, not a normal hospital, not a normal hospital." And she's like, "I don't know what it means." She goes, "I don't know if you were on a ship or in another dimension, but regardless, that hospital was not what you thought it was." And my dad was like, "Yes." He was like, "I know." He goes, "That makes so much sense. Nothing made any sense about it. Everything was off, like everything about it." And so, I mean, there might have been, I don't know what or how to explain any of that, but I told this story on our Patreon, on Journey to Truth. I just told it privately on Patreon, and one of our listeners reached out, and she said, "I worked at that Mercy Hospital for 15 years." She said, "You were in the psych ward where they put homicidal patients. That's why there's armed police. That's why the police were there in the military." And she goes, "You weren't wrong. You were in the basement because we transferred the psych patients through the underground tunnels that are beneath that hospital." And she goes, "They go everywhere, and there's doors that lead to places where I've never been because I didn't have clearance. But if you were in that wing of the hospital, you definitely went underground." And she goes, "I don't know about an interrogation room, But she's like, if you were in that room with the cameras and the glass, the walls, she said that was the psych ward. And I'm like, no shit. And then she said also, the woman in purple scrubs, she goes, it is by code at that Mercy hospital that everybody has to wear black scrubs. She goes, that woman should not have had purple scrubs on. The one that I said was a Lyran. And I said, come to think of it, everyone had black scrubs. She goes, I know. She goes, it was a very strict rule there. And she goes, so the fact that someone had purple scrubs was very, very interesting, she said. And I was like, thank you so much for making me not feel crazy about this. Um, but it was it was right before I was supposed to give my presentation on the history of the secret space program, and I eventually gave my presentation. I still came back to the conference after all that and gave the presentation. And I was approached by two people from MUFON. They want me to speak at the MUFON symposium next year and give the same presentation. They're like, the people from MUFON need to know about the secret space program. I'm like, I don't know, like I don't trust anything with you people anymore. But that was just in October.
Wow. Okay. So this obviously this stuff is still happening to you. I mean, that was very recently. Okay, I do have a couple of things. So Gray Area Monarch, he was in the space for a bit and he posted a couple questions in the chat. He's experienced a lot of this MK Ultra program stuff. He had a couple of questions, and one of them is he says, I want to know which facility in the TVA corridor, uh, and then he has two options here, AEDC or Y12. I'm not sure if you can answer that or not.
Can you repeat that question?
I want to know which facility in the TVA, Tom Victor Adam corridor. I'm not sure. Did you reference that? Because I didn't catch it.
No, I actually don't know what he's talking about.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
And then his second is more of a statement. Behind Missouri Botanical Garden on the same grounds is a possible monarch facility under the guise of the National Garden Club. There's a very odd monarch memorial and quote regarding leading and more reasons to suspect than I will write here. So you'll probably catch that comment later on. You should probably be tagged in it. So that was an interesting statement from him.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm looking at the question now. I see it. Yeah, I don't know, but I did look up. I was doing some research about the botanical garden, and the head botanist or whatever she was named Wendy. Like I found her name on the website, so it was like Wendy's Missouri Botanical Garden. So I don't know what it meant, but had not heard about a monarch facility being behind it. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good little tidbit of information you might be able to check into. I would suggest getting a hold of him. He's fantastic. You might even want to have him on your show if you haven't already. Um, Okay, so I do have just a handful of questions, but I want to encourage anyone who wants to ask Tyler any questions to come up, as long as you're respectful, come up and ask your questions. This is a hell of a story. And again, I think it's so important, Tyler, the overlap between the targeted individuals, the MK Ultra stuff, these secret space program, this covert human abductions, and the alien abductees. We all need to get together more often and compare notes because I think we have answers for each other. Emma, I noticed your mic is open. Did you have a question for Tyler?
Yeah, what I do have is just I'm in Africa right now. I'm in Nigeria. I used to live in Wisconsin and California and the UK. Now I moved around a lot because I each time I was being attacked, and I can relate to all that the speaker before him spoke about being zapped with these microwave frequencies, and I was trying to understand it. But I want to tell you that this thing is manifesting differently in Africa. Right now, the alien side of it took place sometime in California, and we felt that we were all contactees. And while I was there, they were showing me pictures of alien spaceships landing in my neighborhood in Africa, and they were really spooking me out. But I was part of the anti-apartheid movement, so I've been targeted for a long time, and I was in an interracial relationship. Now, my story is a very, very long story, but they actually broke that relationship. I felt like they took my kids. They did take my kids. They put a false narrative on me and they took my kids. But I had to, at one point, the whole thing got so, bad and so uncomfortable. And I did promise that I will come back to take care of my parents because we don't have any kind of social security. So it got to a point where I thought that it was just better to just leave everything and return to Nigeria. When I came back to Nigeria, it turned out that they had actually recruited a lot of the drug type dealers and addicts and pushers and stuff like that. I did actually participate in marijuana once in a while from time to time, but I concentrated mainly on my studies and stuff. And when I came back, I started working with the government, and the thing kind of continued. Now it's gotten to the point I'm not working in government anymore, but it's gotten to the point in Nigeria where they are using these things to monitor people. They monitor you. The abductions are not by aliens; they're by criminal gang, and that's what Nigeria is dealing with right now. Nigeria is dealing with a great deal of insecurity. But what's happening is that somehow they made these things available to some of these guys, and it seems like it's like in the hands of a criminal non-state actors. And I'm hearing some names associated with it down here in Africa, and somehow again it's looped into the the drug campaign, where Nigeria became some kind of a way station to bring drugs into the United States, but they are successful in stopping them at the airports because obviously they are using the remote neural monitoring thing to stop them. But then they are also, I'm a poet also, so sometimes I write stuff, symbolic stuff, in literary art, and it's like they try to stimulate those nightmares, and I know that those nightmares are synthetic nightmares. But in my own case, it turned out that, just to be precise, on the 26th of July, this just past July, I was going to see my son. I came back here and started another family. They cut off my family. They just basically took my kids, yanked my kids away, and my ex-wife kind of took them. And I came here and started another family, and one of them got into school, and I was going to see him. And just at one point at the checkpoint, it's like, if you like know how Nigerian roads operate, I just like give a tip of 500 of naira, Nigerian money, and then all of a sudden this guy's just nine AK-47 toting guys started. If you go on my line down on my account, you see what happened to my car. It's like a miracle that we're alive. They shot at the car. All the while, these guys were tracking me, and apparently they knew me from the United States. Some of them are returnees from America, and sometimes we get feeds that are coming from Texas, and you hear names like G.W. Bush. You hear all kinds of names, and the politicians also here involved. And somehow they want me to stop writing about something. They want me to stop saying about things. But I've been documenting this thing on my X account, and I've given instructions to my kids that if anything ever happens to me, they just need to print my account. So this time they shot up the car. They took myself, my wife, and went into this desolate place and stayed there and extracted a lot of money from my family and my friends. They took my phone. They just basically told me that they were not after my life, that they wanted my money, and they took the money. And what they are doing here is also that they're using these things to track people. They know how much I have in my account. I thought initially, strange thing is that when Whitley Strieber wrote his book, Communion, which was a long time ago, I began to think that there were these alien abductions, because what will happen at night will be very, very strange, where they will, like, I'll feel these sharp pains and stuff like that, and go into this trance kind modes and have these weird dreams and thought. Woke up thinking that I was actually being attacked, and this will happen like when it's like if I stayed on smoke ganja for like 6 months or in a row and decided that at one point or the other that I didn't want, to smoke anymore. In between the time I dried off and everything, these things will always happen. I noticed that pattern, and then I decided to go off completely and stuff. But I kept getting these those kinds of attacks. I released albums, and so I had some friends who didn't like the way I was working. I was working with electronic music, and they, all kinds of stuff involved. But here in Nigeria now, it's an existential issue. It's tied in with the separatists. They had me break off my relationship after they attacked my relationship, my interracial relationship. I came back here and remarried a Nigerian woman, and it's gone to a point also now. They are fighting the children, and it's like I'm fighting between these traffickers. Some of them could be, in fact, are, and drug traffickers who believe that I think that they make me feel like I think that I'm, so different from them. And now each little penny that goes into my account, they know. So when I go to the bank, they're threatening to rob me and everything like that. That's how it's manifesting here. So I'm
Yeah,
hoping
that's
that
pretty wild, Emma. Thank you for
yeah,
jumping in and sharing your story. It's important for us to understand, and that's what the great thing about Twitter is. It brings people
yeah.
from all over the world together. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for jumping in. I want to get to Miss. Oh dear, here we go. Is it Miss McGillicuddy? Do I even want
That's
to
me.
know who this really is? Miss
No,
McGillicuddy. Oh,
that's a nickname my grandmother gave
okay,
me as a kid.
fantastic. Jump
Um,
in. Do you have a question for Tyler? We're gonna
I just
mostly be sticking to questions for Tyler,
I got like
for
I
this
know a lot of us
space.
here have a real have if we relate to any of it, we all have a long story, so I will not do that. I just wanted to express support. I've been TI. Um, mine my whole journey began in 2019. I had repressed memories come back. What I've discovered in my journey and my healing process is that um, I have DID from um, CSA and some ritual abuse, as well as um, gate programming that was facilitated through two private schools that I went to, which is pretty rare for gate because that was a public school forum. But my research I've gone into I've seen that um, it's not improbable because it happened. Um, I had crazy, just crazy stuff. The TI stuff, um, sleep paralysis. I've had lucid dreaming my whole life since I was a child. Everything from shadow people, astral travel, but it really amped up when I woke up, if you will. And the I was still heavily kind of in the new age. Jesus Christ saved me, and once I got sober, um, everything got even more intense. I started having some more TI stuff, everything from like phones just randomly going black screen of death. Ironically, it would be when I'm researching things. I'd get random phone calls with tones. My research showed that that was something that was activation tones. Two of them I recognized from a music class that I had in the third grade, where we would play these xylophones in a circle, and we would have to keep, each person would have the tones we have to do, but then there'd be these one lessons where we'd all be literally playing the same sequence of five notes. Um, that's the whole gate experience is insane, but and I know I'm not alone in there here. Long story short, this is all a very spiritual and technical experience that we're all going through. There's physical components and there's physical things that happen to us, but there's a very spiritual nature to it. And by that, I mean etheric, right? Like we can't see it, but it's happening. And most of us are used to being labeled nuts, crazy, paranoid, and anything else that as a pseudonym for any of those words. Probably on a very common basis, if not more than we'd like, right? But I genuinely related to your story, Fringe Journey. I feel you there. Hiker Gal, I've heard some of your story. And everybody else out there, like, if you haven't experienced these things, it seems insane. It seems totally nuts. And let me tell you, as other people who've experienced it too. It is nuts. All the stuff that's happening is crazy. It's nuts. It's wild. It's beyond imagination, it feels like sometimes. But everything happens for a reason. And they know who we are. And some of it's bloodline. Um, I found out that my bloodline, I have two very high prominent bloodlines in my bloodline. We have some military, but we have a lot of, it goes into the seed war stuff. I don't know if you guys know anything about Gary Wayne, but he's really informed on that. I've met in survivor groups of CSA and ritual abuse, who also have things like DID, like myself. Um, when I found out that it was just like Tyler, your story, where you said like all of a sudden you like could take on, like, if you're walking down the street, all of a sudden you're like, I could fight those people, I could lift that refrigerator. I found out that there were more than just me. There were fractures in that were activated, created, but by the grace of God. The Lord created our minds the way that He did because He knew that people would do horrible things out of their freedom of choice to children. And the Lord speaks about people who hurt children. And what does He say? He says that they should poke their eyes out, they should cut their arms off, they should tie a millstone around their neck. Um, but he created us, and He knew that people might do that. So He created our minds this beautiful way where when they create these fractures, I always imagine in my healing journey that the Lord is filling those fracture lines like I'm a big mirror that's a bunch of pieces, and He's filling in those cracks with gold, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where they take old ceramic or pottery or tea sets that have cracked and they repair them with gold so that they're more beautiful than they were to begin with. And this whole journey, having a support system is great because sometimes it's not your family. Sometimes it's not the people that should be, maybe, I guess. And I just want to thank all of you uh, for all the work that you do, for the people who bravely approach people, even if it falls on deaf ears, with the truth of what's happening to them. You're not alone. This is a big giant web of weirdness and darkness that people are doing um, to people for whatever their reasons and gains. It's probably not positive, but we can heal and we can fight this. And when it comes to, in the title there, the definitely no super soldiers, we are soldiers. We're soldiers in a crazy, crazy battle, a crazy battle that most of the world can't even see. And they're so blind and so mind controlled into blissful ignorance that it'll take them having to experience something, or having a semi awakening of their own where at least the scales come off their eyes, and then they can't. Because once you see, we all know this, once you see and you experience something, there's no going back. You saw what you saw, you experienced what you experienced. And um, it takes a lot of bravery and to get through a lot of pain. But, from my experience of recovery of addiction, the only way out is through. So, every day I find more stuff out about my crazy, crazy life. But for me, healing with God, He created me. He created me for a purpose. He knew that people were going to hurt me, but He made my mind and my spirit so strong that if I leaned on Him, I would be able to heal. I would be able to. He would repair and help repair that with me, and help me understand my parts. Um, and it's I'm ever grateful for what the Lord's done for me, and I'm ever grateful for more people who come out and just bravely go, hey, you want to hear a crazy story? I got like 35 of them. And you guys come on here, and the world's a better place when people are, everyone throws that word authentic, but it really is. Um, and, something my grandma used to tell me is that your light will shine too bright for some people. And a lot of us, the more we meet each other, we realize that that was kind of been the story throughout our life, and we always felt like we were ordinary or less than ordinary. That usually tends to be pretty commonality there, but we're soldiers. We are. We're soldiers in a spiritual battle, which is actually existence in this realm, right? And it may be something that we don't get accolation or accolades and praise for, but God knows, and all of us here know. And I just want to, all of you guys are in my prayers, and I thank you so much. Thank you, Tyler, for sharing your story. Um, and you guys aren't alone. And I know I don't have a picture on here yet, but I'm a real person, uh, and I'm willing to fight this battle with all, with however we find each other, right? Um, because it is one. It is a battle, but it's one worth fighting for, and it's, I really believe, tied to purpose, meaning. Um, you know, I don't think it's always someone's purpose to like be a car salesman. Maybe I'm part of their journey, but if I go unseen, I just want to hope that each one of us and you guys, if all of us go unaccoladed, we plant these seeds, right? Because truth always finds a way to the light, no matter how much was done in the dark. And we just keep fighting for truth. Um, Once you're awake, you kind of have no other choice. Uh, it's a scary place, but it's we're built for this. All the stuff we're built for this, and if anything, they whoever they are, right? These controllers, the they'll have a reckoning day. They literally built their own demise in all of us, because we can see what they're doing. We know what they're doing, and I'm ready to fight this battle with you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Miss McGillicuddy, and I'm sorry for butchering your name. I really appreciate everything you just said. It was absolutely beautiful. We'll get to Hiker Gal. Go ahead.
So, Tyler, I have a quick question for you. When you're talking about the clones and everything, my understanding is that you've been in clones, correct?
I mean, apparently, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I have memories from other realities and timelines, and potentially those are clones that I'm remembering. I don't know though.
Okay. So, are you on like some type of mission in these clones or anything like that? Or do you have that feel that you're on some type of mission while in a clone? Are you aware that you're in a clone?
No, I'm not aware I'm in a clone, but I have. I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, telling all this stuff and like many more of like the memories I have from these programs and missions, and you never know that you're a clone. It's definitely feels like you. It's your consciousness, and like how does a clone know that it's a clone? I don't know that they do. Maybe they do if they're told, but um, I as far as the memories coming through, it just seems like me, and then I have to decipher and distinguish. Okay, well, obviously that didn't happen in this timeline in this reality, but I have a solid memory, so much so that I can write about it, and I am. And a lot of times it's just like clandestine missions working for some three-letter agency here on Earth, and we're infiltrating a facility, dropping off a package, just like the stuff that you see in the movies, kind of. And sometimes it goes south, sometimes it's successful. Sometimes I have, memories from like other planets and a lot of memories from military bases. Colorado Springs, I have a whole memory, a whole story, a memory from being there. And I actually went there to the Air Force Academy and um, broke down in tears because I had realized that I had been there before, but it couldn't have been me. It was a version of me, but I knew my way around. And my friend I was with, I was able to tell her um, what was in each building and everything. And we walked around and confirmed it all. And like her mind was blown, and my mind was blown. because and then there was so many things that happened that verified it. But I mean, that had to either have been like on another timeline or a clone body. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Because what you're describing is the same things that are happening to me. And I know most of the times that that I know that I'm in a clone. My consciousness is in a clone. Um, and uh, and I've been on mission. So that's very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Gives me some validation.
of course. And I did want to add one thing to the end of that story I was telling. So I booked a session right after that because I was going crazy for days after I left the hospital, Mercy in Springfield, and I just was completely depleted. Like whatever they did to me in the hospital and with almost dying, I like just couldn't. I was just done. I couldn't even think. I was brain fog, everything. And I just kept telling my dad. He kept asking me every day how I was. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm the same person that I was before that happened. I don't know how to describe it. Like I don't feel like the same Tyler. And I finally reached out to my Akashic record reader. Her name's Leah Ray, and she's the most gifted reader I've ever met as far as opening up your records and just pulling information that's so accurate. I mean, it's scary. And like she's like her, whatever I'm trying to say. I just she's the real deal. Anyway, so I said, hey, can you open my records? I know it's late at night, but I'm going crazy. I need to know what happened at the hospital. And she opened it up, and she saw that first thing. The first word that she got was execute, assassination. She's like, well, there was like an attempt on you, on your life. And I was like, yep. I said, there sure was. And then she also verified without me front loading her with any information that she saw me in the basement. She goes, you were in the basement of a facility, and the Army and the CIA was there. She saw Army, CIA, and complex, like industrial complex. She's like, the CIA has their own army, and that's who was there. Like it wasn't the U.S. Army, but they like are under the guise. They are the U.S. Army, but they're not. And she saw that, and I said, well, what were they like? What were they doing? And she said that they were interrogating you. They were trying to see, you were starting to have memories from Fort Leonard Wood, and she didn't say Fort Leonard Wood, but she said you were starting to have memories come back, and they wanted to see what you were remembering. And she said they only had you for like 20 minutes or so because your dad would have known that you were, had they kept you any longer, your dad would have known you were missing. Something was up. So they didn't get anything out of you, she said, from what she was able to tap into. But they were just more or less seeing what you remembered from that timeline, that clone, whatever that whatever it was. And but she said they got nothing out of you, and I found that very interesting because I didn't front load her with any of that information. It just came through, and I have the recording to prove it if I ever had to. You know that this just came right out of the records.
Thank you, Tyler. Amy, welcome to the space. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Tyler. Thank you for sharing your story. It's pretty incredible. I'm definitely like, don't know much about my labs or any of that. I'm on the like alien abduction side. But we have, Fringe and I've been talking about the similarities, especially with them kind of like altering you to a different state and then even to a whole different alter. And I recently actually met or spoke with my friend about DID and just her experiences, which are, more down to earth. But the way she kind of like talked about her experiences, it kind of like clicked that it sounds very similar to what they do on board. And then it got me thinking about the My Labs. And so, first of all, I just want to like try to determine like how it's different and then how is the memory recall different, I guess. So my first question is, it sounds like they use drugs on you to kind of like send you, I mean, you said there's a code word And then you said that they'll drug you, but is that to like kind of control you better? Or is it just the truth serum thing that they drug you at for?
Yeah, so on the ambulance, they just gave me the sodium pentothal, which can be used as a truth serum. It is, and there's like a few different names for it too, but it all does the same thing. And so it just makes you compliant more than anything. Ketamine does the same thing. If you ever get a ketamine shot, it does the same exact thing. It just makes you compliant, for lack of a better term. And that's what happened there. Now, as far as the codes go, that was something completely different. There were no drugs involved there.
Okay. And then with memory recall, is it like it's like after the event, do you have it's almost like a complete blank, but then things later start to seep in? Or is there kind of like this vague awareness that you've been somewhere, but you can't quite pinpoint it? Is that like
Yeah, it shows up in a number of different ways. Sometimes it can come in the form of a dream, but it's not, it's not a dream. Like I'm talking about, like the wild memories, like that have no place in this reality, but it wasn't a dream, and because it was just so real, and sometimes even like your physical body feels the effects of it, and um, so sometimes it happens like that. Other times it'll be something in my like day to day life will triggers a memory, and like I'll start getting memories back from something. I'm like, oh yeah, like how do I know that? Wait a minute, and I gotta sit for a second, and like sometimes I'll have to like collect my thoughts and figure out why did I know this? When did this happen? Why do I remember being in Falcon Air Force Base in Colorado Springs? Why do I remember being wherever it is? Um, and then it's just that's how it happens sometimes. And then once you like get one piece, and you especially if you write it down, like it can like more and more of it starts coming through, but it's not like it's just like your regular life. Like you don't remember every single thing that happened to you. Like you couldn't explain your 13th birthday to me right now, but you remember the highlights. You remember the high and low points of your life, and that's what it is. Like so, you'll just remember like high and low points of the memories, but sometimes you don't have a beginning or end. Um, I think it's just a number of ways your memories can come back, but I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, that's pretty clear because I mean, I've been like working because I've done regressions with David Jacobs. And so after doing it with him and then learning, that kind of like opened up a little portal in my brain, where I could um more easily access memories. Now, obviously, I do not know. Like you have some of your memories, you have validation, right? Because they're whatever's they're doing to you, they're doing it down here. So it's harder to have that validation. There's only been a few points that I could talk about, but I'm I'm wanting to like not have to rely on regression and especially to validate some certain things that are happening based on what regression's coming up. So I was just kind of wondering, like, is there, because I did take like a supplement route in my investigation to try to maybe kind of improve like my brain, like neural firing. And it did, it did work, and they weren't thrilled. And this is like, it's, when I started that research, this is the first time that I saw someone from the military appear on board based on, and that's not for, lack of knowing that this is happening down here with the military and CIA and whatever. But it was the first time I saw someone from down there because they don't, they're different from the hybrids that I deal with. Um, and he showed up in a Navy uniform to threaten me. So I do believe that that research was kind of like poking the bear a little bit. But I found that obviously you cannot rely on supplements and drugs. Essentially they're drugs to improve memory. It could help improve like your brain clarity, but this one drug, galantamine, it's just too intense on the system. So I was kind of wondering, okay, what else can I do to sort of trigger conscious recall, especially in the moment that I'm dealing with him. So I don't know if you have like any kind of pointers
Yeah,
that you've noticed.
I do actually. So there's Tony Rodriguez. I don't know if you're familiar with his secret space program testimony, but he's done a memory course where he like has developed a great way to start documenting and remembering your memories, right? And he has you like draw out a timeline. And people like when he asked them to draw the timeline, they're like, I don't know, this is stuff is all over the place. He's like, we'll try. He's like, just start writing it down and create a timeline, a chronological order of when you think these things happened, and even if they don't fit in, just put them down. And like that's just the beginning of it. I don't know the whole protocol, but a hundreds of people use that protocol and they love it. Like it's an amazing way to start recall, like regaining your memories. And really, it's just about focusing. I think it's all intention and taking the time and writing it down and organizing it. So once it's organized on paper, you've created new space for new memories to come in. I think is like ultimately what you're looking at there. And I would
Right.
definitely not recommend the pharmaceuticals because that is you're just like playing into their hands because then you're more susceptible to the mind control technology and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, in this with this pharmaceutical, not so much because it's not a sedative, it's the opposite. It's a cholinergic agonist, so it makes the it makes the neurons fire a lot. And so I actually had conscious recall because I set up my experiment, and I'm not advocating for drug use, obviously. And this is a supplement, but I think it has been recently put on the drug list because it's being used to treat Alzheimer's disease. But when I did it, I kind of set up my experiment where I have certain preventative measures I use to keep them from coming around. And then I would like stop those, take the drug, go back to sleep. And I did have conscious recall of them dealing with me on my bed. So, all the things that you're talking about, that's after the fact, which I have my own system. And then the regression, it's on point with the whole timeline thing because especially David, he was very like intent on making sure that I recall chronologically, and that helped the brain kind of stay focused. But I guess I'm talking more like, do you feel like by doing the former work, do you feel like it's helping you to like increases the chances of conscious recall during the event is my question, I guess.
Well, sometimes I think that you have real time bleed through. So, like a phantom pain, let's say you have a phantom pain one day, you don't know where it's coming from. Your clone body could have just had its arm cut off, just for as an example. And your arm is killing you, right? Um, there's I think phantom pains can come from a clone body or another version of you if it's your consciousness that's split and in that body, right? You're gonna somehow it can trickle back into this version of you, and you can actually feel the effects of that. The movie The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's about cloning. That movie depicts exactly that. The clones, when somebody's cloned and something happens to the clone, when they reclone that person, the new clone has a pain in the area where they were killed in the last body. So it's really interesting to think about like that. But sometimes I think, depending on how significant the event is in the other version of you, because it's probably happening parallel to this reality, I think if it's significant, you can experience real time bleed through, meaning it's not from the past or the present or not from the past or the future. It's like from right now, like something that's happening right now somewhere else in the universe, or whatever timeline or version of that self um, is doing, of yourself is doing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, I mean, there's that. Like when they take me, they want me physically involved with them. So they'll take me. I have time loss. It's not like an alter or like they do alter my mind, but it's not like it's a clone thing. Um, I'm just wondering, you're with your memory in the basement when you're at the Mercy Hospital. That it sounds like that was conscious recall, and it was just for a second, and something they probably didn't want you to have.
yeah, that
um,
that was that was all conscious recall, and even during that Akashic Records session, she said that something broke the blood-brain barrier. Um, Whatever happened, I remembered. I wasn't supposed to remember, but something happened that I remembered. She said the way it looked was that I shouldn't have remembered any of that, but I did somehow.
and do you have any ideas of what maybe triggered you to kind of come out of that altered state?
Not, no, I really don't. I mean, I can speculate, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah, Amy, we'll have to try that Tony Rodriguez thing. I was supposed to. I keep meaning to look this guy up because actually, Tyler, you told me about Tony Rodriguez. I think when we spoke on on your show. So we should look that up and just try those exercises and see what happens for all of us. Really, it's probably a good exercise. Hiker gal will probably jump in on that too. We'll see if we can get some other people doing it and see how it works. Um, Smith, welcome to the space. Let's see how it goes. What's your question?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, thank you so much. Really enjoying listening. I was just trying to entice some of my more skeptical friends to come over here, because they always make fun of me for UAP stuff. But yeah, so because we fight flat earthers and other things, so you understand. But that's the thing, you see. If I bring them over, then it drives engagement. Everyone has a good time. So we have our own little UAP guild as well. It's nothing much, but y'all are always welcome in spaces. I won't bite your head off, promise. Keep it to the threads only. But yeah, I actually had some. I was curious for the room and for Journey to Truth. So I'll be real quick, but I've never, this is a recorded space. I've never said any of this stuff before, but it's not that big of a deal. It's just that sleep paralysis is something that I experienced when I was in the Air Force as well. And not that I don't think it has anything to do with it. I literally don't know, and that's why I didn't even have enough time to keep up with all this stuff. So it's just fun to be in the mix and ask questions and see what people say. The only other thing that happened to me was when I was a kid. I got a fever, and then I woke my mom up in the middle of the night and told her that there were aliens in the house. But it was weird because like even I knew there weren't, but I said it to her. And I think it's because I had a fever, and because I had watched part of Fire in the Sky, which will scare the hell out of you at a certain age. I mean, that'll scare the hell out of you anyway. So I'm probably too young to be watching that. Um, but yeah, so that happened, and then the sleep paralysis thing. I was just curious to see if anyone would say like, oh, the one more thing before I mention that. Okay, the only other thing is I used to be really afraid that aliens would come and get me. Unusually afraid, I would say. Like I would look through the window, and maybe it's just because I was like kind of a displaced kid and stuff like that. So I would look through the window, and I didn't see they were there or sense they were there, but I was afraid. And so I would hide under the covers and stuff, maybe past the age that most kids would. And I don't know. That's a thing. But I've never had anything really happen but the sleep paralysis, that's my question. So is there any explanation for sleep paralysis? And I didn't even again hear the whole thing, but other than some kind of I don't know, because the phenomenon is widespread. It's something people report, and they report the same things, over and over again, even without the NHI or alien conversation being part of it. So, as if it is, some kind of shadow thing that's trying to sit on your chest in particular. That's why they say it's linked to like in terms of being asleep and not wanting to act out what you do when you dream or whatever. I don't know. I don't know that much about it. I just know that it's the scariest thing ever when it happens because it felt like it feel to me like I wanted to wake up and I go, okay, 1, 2, 3, and I try to like get myself to move, but I couldn't. Like I was aware, but my body felt completely paralyzed and like I almost couldn't breathe, and it was really, really scary. So it's a really, really scary phenomenon. I've experienced it more than once. Yeah, and I'll keep listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Smith. Tyler, did you want to respond? Or I'll very briefly say that I think there is such a thing as actual sleep paralysis, where our bodies are dreaming and our brains or bodies put off some chemicals to keep us from sleepwalking and such. But I also think sleep paralysis is just used as a blanket excuse for the other things that are happening. And there are many of us who experience sleep paralysis with and without entities, with just straight technology, with no entities at all. So I think it's both. I think it's both, if not all of the above.
What do
I
you mean
think
straight technology?
so. I have been paralyzed just with straight technology, without an entity, without being able. Here's what I should say: without being able to perceive an entity. So I've been paralyzed by entities, shadow people. I've been paralyzed by shadow people who seemingly turn into a gray alien. There are abductees who have actually seen shadow people use technology on their belts to hit a little button and they turn into gray aliens. So there's definitely some overlap there. But then I've just experienced straight technology to the brain, paralyzed. There's no entity. I'm not asleep. I'm not dreaming. It's a MyLabs type thing. And there's no entity involved at all. So I think it could be many things, and it's probably not just one thing. Tyler, did you want to respond, or Hiker Gal, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I will. I agree with you. There's a number of explanations for it. Most of the time, the mainstream. I've read the journals and the medical journals and stuff, and listened to some doctors, the mainstream doctors, and it's kind of funny because they throw these word salads together, and they really think they know what they're talking about, but they have no idea. And because I was really looking for answers when this was happening, and I was getting so frustrated. I'm like, nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about. Like, this isn't what's happening to me. Um, I think that yeah, the tech there's a technology that can put you in like an induced a state of paralysis, or at least mimic a paralysis. It can freeze your body in some way, shape, or form. I think there's entities involved that probably have the ability to just do it, like the mantid beings that they can penetrate your mind psychically. I think they can even control your body if they wanted to, and probably other beings can do the same thing. Also, I've heard it explained, and I think this has even happened to me before. Like if you're astral projecting and you don't realize that you're astral projecting, and let's just say your physical body wakes up before your soul, for lack of a better term, is back in your body, you'll experience a state of paralysis because you woke up before you're fully integrated back into your physical vessel. Because when we go to sleep, we leave. We're not in our body. And then I've had like weird, like mild paralysis, like Fringe was talking about, where it kind of just it doesn't seem nefarious at all, but it's like this weird thing your body does sometimes. And so I think it's all the above. Like there's a number of different explanations for it, but you have to bring the paranormal side of the conversation. You have to bring that into the conversation. It's not going to be explained away without that, you know.
Is that helpful, Smith?
Yeah, so okay, so yeah, so okay, so it's either the paranormal you're saying has to be part of it. And then or the technology. So it can't there is no like that's what I was just trying to dice out. I mean, in terms of like is there just some just kind of reasonable explanation in terms of like I don't know, some kind of hiccup in terms of how you wake up and stuff because I remember being in situations where I was stressed out and or like I was in an uneasy sleep to begin with, So yeah, because yeah, the idea that the technology, like, what would be the point of doing it to me then? Like, if it was tech, and the paranormal. I'm just thinking, and I also know other people, who have explained it to me, and they're like talking about a demon and stuff. And I said, yeah, it's sleep paralysis. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, it's called sleep paralysis, man. It happened to me. I mean, it's a thing. I get it. And I don't know, is it the mystical side of us that just wants to make it so, or is there something going on? And like I said, it's an easy thing to dismiss if you haven't had it happen to you. So I just appreciate y'all, the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and it could be both, right? I think there is a legitimate condition called sleep paralysis. It's legitimate. It happens to many people. And then there's the non-legitimate side that gets written off as sleep paralysis. If you can observe an entity in the room, so I had these experiences for most of my adult life, and when I found out about this thing called sleep paralysis, I thought, "Oh, thank heaven. This is, explainable and it's not at all what I thought. It's just a hallucination. There's not really a tall, dark shadow in my room, emitting death vibes. It's just I'm just hallucinating. Oh, thank heaven." And I came to a point in my life where I was actually conscious and awake to witness a shadow being on top of me, paralyzed. Like Tyler, I got decent at getting out of it, and I get out of it, and there's a gray alien standing in my bedroom. Well, what is that? So if I'm awake, and don't forget that a lot of people, after they have a sleep paralysis incident, they actually end up awake with an entity in their room. And the medical people will try to say, well, that's just residual, DMT in your head. It's all just a hallucination. What about people who are being touched by these entities? People who end up, with marks on their bodies from these entities. So there's definitely a gray area there that I think we need to leave open. And people who have experienced sleep paralysis with an entity will tell you it's absolutely real. It's not a hallucination. And you can take your medical books and shove them, elsewhere. And as far as the technology that I was talking about, I have had the technology just hit the back of my brain. I could feel the electricity in the back of my head, and I'm paralyzed. No entity, just technology. So that's the difference there. Hopefully that's helpful, Smith. We do have a gal coming in. I actually just firmed it up with her, hiker gal, 2 Mondays from now on the 16th. We have a gal named Vicky Joy who's somewhat of an expert on sleep paralysis, and she's going to come in and talk about it. So maybe you'll be able to jump into that space, Smith.
Hey, appreciate you.
Hiker gal, go ahead.
You kind of beat me to the punch because I was gonna say that first and foremost, you want to rule out anything prosaic with sleep paralysis. But once you've experienced it, both with a non-entity versus an entity, to me, I can kind of tell the difference. Um, so yeah, you kind of beat me to that, but you said it much more eloquently than I did. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not eloquence, it's just rambling, just lots of words. But thank you. Miss McGillicuddy, were you trying to jump in on that sleep paralysis thing?
Yeah, it's wild how the Tyler and Amy were talking about the cloning and the memory retrieval also, but it's wild how the cloning concept where people are feeling that they're fractured into different with their consciousness into cloning, the eerie similarity with DID from my own personal experience leads me to wonder if, just like sleep paralysis, we have, like I'd mentioned before, a spiritual as well as a technical component. If you know anything about the ancient mystery schools, where a lot of um, tech, kind of like the tech everyone talks about that the government's hiding, and um, all of this kind of stuff has been honed for so long. Probably the closest that we could find of any documents anywhere near proving these kinds of things, where they mix, the old world alchemy, which would be, uh, chemistry mixed with magic. They were doing it in World War II, pre-World War II. They were really trying to find a way to fracture the mind, to split the consciousness, both kind of aspects. And it's fascinating to me when Tyler was going on about feeling like a different person, because that is so much the experience that I personally have with DID, where I mean there will be some times where I'll be like, there'll be a derealization where I'll feel like I'm here, but like this isn't really my body. Why don't I have the same emotional reaction to certain things? And it's, for me, it's because there's somebody else co-fronting or trying to, as I'm retrieving memories and understanding parts, and they're comfortable coming forward. It sounds very similar to the memory retrieval concept with the cloning and abductions. I guess where I'm getting at is the there's all so much of, we all may have different experiences specifically, but there's such a similar connection. In the sense of this, the fracturing of the mind, the feeling out of place, even like my own experience with sleep paralysis, with Fringe, you mentioned about time jumping. I remember watching you on Tony Merkel, and you mentioned somebody in the dream saying something about time jumping, or somebody told you about time jumping. I had a dream before you had that interview, before I watched it, about a week before, where I'm in this dream and I'm in a loop. It's a sleep paralysis dream, because I have very lucid dreams, and still and the astral travel and whatever the spiritual nature, whoever it is, they really like to get me in the dream world. Um, but I'm aware of these things now, and but I'm in this dream where I'm like trapped. I'm in this place. I see these people. I have this inner knowing about everything that everybody's doing already. I'm kind of feeling like I'm in my soldier part, like very just ready to go. But happen to look down at my clothes, and what feels like a few days later, I'm in this. It's like a hotel. It's like a few days later, some gentleman who had talked to me on the first day comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's your vacation? How's your day going?" I'm like, "Good. I've been here for a few days." And he's like, "What are you talking about? It's only been one day. Are you time jumping again?" And I was like, "What?" And that was my first experience with having someone mention the time jumping. But the time jumping is what astral kind of feels like. The sucked back in your body thing that happens in sleep paralysis. I'm a big believer whenever these things are happening to me. I don't eat or drink things people give me, because those are contracts. I know Vicky Joy talks a lot about that. I love her. Um, I mean, there's the whole concept of they really they do mess with our minds, right? And like Troy or Taylor, excuse me, Tyler said, when you're sleeping, we're not in our body, right? We're the Bible even says many times that people will pray for protection while they're sleeping, and it's not just because like a lion or animal could come and get them while their body's laying there. It's because we're going into the spirit, right? And they access us there through the V2K stuff. I've had the zapping thing. Oh my gosh, that's like the friggin' worst. Um, but the sleep paralysis is wild, and these connections, how they're so similar, is I'm excited and flabbergasted and excited to see that we all may have been on different message boards. Maybe one's alien abductions, one's TI, and then cloning, and then like myself with DID. There's so many similarities. It's so fascinating. But that's how amazing the mind and how amazing God is. That like we're all so different. We all may have similar but slightly different stories, but it's all connected. And I'm with you, Fringe. Like they're all pieces of the puzzle, right? And um, so we're putting this the enemy's planned together as a little team of soldiers with our wild experiences. I apologize, that was probably a little jumbled, but it's just very fascinating to me, and I'm so excited that I clicked on this today. Thank you again. God bless you all.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. We're happy to have you here. Thank you. Smith, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think the Fringe has a hand up. I don't know if you can see, or maybe I'm glitching.
You know, Fringe is the hand goes up, the hand goes down. I'm not
Okay,
really sure what's happening.
right on.
But if it's on this topic, go ahead, and if
Sure.
not, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, when you mentioned a contract, I mean, I never would bring it up until that was just said something about a contract about accepting food or something, and I'm a permaculture designer, so I teach permaculture design, and it's like growing food, designing cities and parks and whatever, like designing the whole human society. So I just think about that a lot in terms of this topic, and so if anyone has anything to say about that, if not, no big deal. But I'm all in terms of health, et cetera, how that connects to this stuff, eating, growing your own food. And the intentional, I'm into the intentional community stuff, right? It's a whole scheme, hobo railroad, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But that's not the point. I'm just thinking about the food, the clean water, the food, having access to that, how that plays into any of this. If anyone can comment on that at all, I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know about clean water and food. You mean just how does clean water and food affect us 3D and then going into spiritual?
Uh,
Or are you talking about the contracts that Miss M was referring to?
yeah, because
Because what they do, yeah, they try to get you in the dreamscape. And I can't wait to talk to Vicky Joy about this. She's really good about the dreamscape stuff. And if you want to hear about the astral dreamscape, James Bartley's really good at it too. But it's kind of like what Tyler was speaking to earlier. They get you into a dream, and these dreams are being controlled by an entity or by technology if you're a targeted individual, or both. If you listen to Elisa, she will tell you that they can't even do this without the entities technology, but they get you into the dreamscape, the astral dreamscape, and they try to get you under, they're always looking for permission and consent. And if you won't give it to them, they'll just steal it from you. So what they do is they try to give you food. It's bizarre. They try to get you to eat or drink something. And when you accept it, it's like giving them consent. When this was first happening to me, I thought this was a weird hospitality type situation, and then I very quickly realized that no, it's not hospitality. They're actually they're trying to get you into a contract. I've had in the dreamscape, have the entities trying to get me to sign contracts to have surgeries and all kinds of bizarre stuff. So, Hiker Gal, go ahead.
Kind of off the topic, but my question for Tyler also is I know I was late to the space because of extenuating circumstances in my household. And I heard y'all talking about parasite cleansing and everything. My question to Tyler is, what do you use to parasite cleanse? And as a side note, while I'm thinking about it, it's very interesting that you have a tree nut allergy because I do too. So I find that fascinating. Makes me wonder how many more people do.
Me too.
Right. Yeah. So what's interesting about my tree nut allergy, and I'll get to your question, but right after that whole incident happened, and I went to Sedona for um, an event, and I ended up Fringe. You might notice I ended up staying with this 85-year-old man. He was a quantum physicist who worked 40 years for the shadow government, reverse engineering UFOs, and all kinds of stuff. But it was absolutely fascinating. But I also, so it was weird that I ended up at that guy's house right after all this happened, and he just like spilled the beans, spilled his guts to me about all this stuff. And then I met this girl who was a medical medium, a medical intuitive, and she just like kind of started randomly getting a message for me. And she said, "You have a rare heavy metal in your body that's causing an allergic reaction to something." And I'm like, she's like, "Do you mind if I like?" She's like, "I'm a medical medium, a medical intuitive," and so she downloaded like this whole thing. She's like, "Yeah, you have a. If you don't mind me being too forward, she's like, you have a rare heavy metal in your. It's actually residing in your testicles." And she said she thinks it was. She goes, "I don't know how it got into your body. Possibly an alien abduction." Um, she thought it was from an abduction that I had this metal put in my body that was causing this nut allergy. And it turns out that men actually, that's one place where heavy metals reside. They'll settle in the testicles, and it's really really hard to move them out unless you do an intense detox. Like even the heavy metal detox won't necessarily get them. Um, so she seemed to think that the nut allergy came from a heavy metal that was in my a rare heavy metal in my body that came from an abduction. So I mean, chew on that one. And so the parasite thing, absolutely. I use, like I said, the chlorine dioxide. I think it's KV Labs is the brand. It's a MMS that whenever Trump got made fun of for telling everybody to drink bleach, well, that's it because it works. Like it'll heal everything. It actually that specific protocol will reverse Alzheimer's. I mean, it'll cure cancer. It'll do everything. Parasites are like the root of all any ailment and any disease. You do a parasite cleanse and you can target it specifically. I mean, you can really heal yourself. But you can't just do it. People haphazardly jump into the cleanses and then they'll get sick because if you're not flushing out the die off symptoms are actually worse. So when a parasite dies, it actually explodes, it combusts, and you can see this under a microphone or a microscope. And it like explodes all these toxins into your body that like whatever's inside the parasite. It just like it spontaneously combusts and now it's into your bloodstream and in your body. So you need some kind of binder, like a biotoxin binder, or a bentonite clay. Chlorella works. I mean, there's a number of things you can take as a binder to bind these stuff and help them bind the die off and help it flush it out of your body. But you can't just start a parasite cleanse without neutralizing the parasites first. You have to paralyze them, and you need some sort of like I guess a wormwood, but there's something called Mimosa pudica that I like to take. Mimosa, Mimosa pudica, Pudica, and what it does is you have to neutralize them because if you don't neutralize them first or paralyze them, whatever word you want to use, when you try to kill them, the parasites will actually cling on to your organs even harder. Like they'll bite, they'll like grab on to your cling on even harder, and um, you won't actually be killing them. You're just scaring them away. So you have to neutralize them and then kill them, and then make sure you flush out the die off. And it's like a 21-day protocol if you want to do the intense protocol. And then some people say that you should do 3 21-day protocols back to back, but I've never done that. That's like so intense. But it changes your life. When the very first time I did it, I was having dreams where I was like having dreams where I would see this like warning sign. It would say parasite detected. And it was like this flashing alarm. And like I was really, really sick at the time. And I was guided to this parasite cleanse just divinely, and I started doing it, and it changed my life forever. Like I never had so much mental clarity, and so many things changed in my life after I did that first cleanse, and I've done a number of them since then. So I don't know. I just kind of rambled on there, but I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. I wasn't writing it down. I'll just have to come back to this point in the recording to write it down. But yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Um, so since you mentioned heavy metal for nut allergy, that's very interesting as well because if this metal sits in a man's testicles, it makes me wonder if it sits in some type of reproductive area for women as well. So that's interesting. Do you know what the heavy metal is, or did you ever find out?
Yeah, you know what? She said the name, and I didn't write it down. It was such a weird, like off the cuff thing I wasn't expecting. But I remember when she said the name, she had never heard of the metal, and I had never heard of it. Whatever she like channeled, right? So I don't know. And I did have something that I wanted to bring up this off topic, but it answers your question earlier about the clones. Um, if that's okay. Whenever the part of the story was whenever I met the girl in Australia. So the reason she found me online is because she claims that she met me like 2 weeks earlier in Australia at a gas station. And she said that a man in a she had this crazy like recall memory. She woke up to her TV like flying off her dresser and it broke on the floor and like this whole thing and like this whole weird event happened and she was like asking for clarity. She's like, I need to know what happened. She went to the gas station and there was this Air Force, this man in Air Force uniform. He walked up to her and he gave her a keychain that said then, now, and always, and it was an Air Force keychain. And he said, "Have a good day, ma'am," and walked away. she says that was me. She said it was me, but it wasn't me. Unless it had to have been a clone. But whenever she saw me online, and she like was nervous to tell me the story, but she told me, she's like, I met you already, like in Australia, and like, and that's how we had this connection, because she was trying to figure out like how I could have been there and here. And then the same thing happened with a woman. She reached out to me and sent me an email. I know her. She's a good friend of mine. And she's like, hey, it was great talking to you in LA over the weekend. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, in LA, at the hotel, at the conference. I'm like, I wasn't in LA. And she's like, yes, you were. And she's like, are you playing with me? I'm like, no. And she's like, we had a whole conversation on the elevator. And she told me everything that happened. And I was like, that was not me. And she goes, no, it was you. So like it, and Max Spears used to talk about this a lot. He used to have people tell him the same stories about all over the world. People would say, "Oh, I saw you in." Ironically enough, St. Louis, where I live, was one of the places. Somebody's like, "Oh, I saw you in St. Louis," or "I interacted with you here," but he wasn't actually. And he was like, "No, I've been here the whole time." So, like, we could have like operational clones just on other parts of the world, and we don't even realize it.
I 100% believe that.
Hey, the Fringe. I'm not sure if you want to speak or your hand is down right now on my side, but I've seen it go up a few times. Did you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, no, I've had it up. I didn't know it was going down. Yeah, I just wanted to come to support Tyler, so I seen you guys were in here.
Yeah, her hand's been up. It looks like it's been up for a while,
Mm.
but I guess not.
No, I had it up. I wanted to come in to say hi, and I had two questions. But I loved. I didn't hear the beginning, so I'm not sure if you already touched on my questions. But
Can anybody hear
can
anything,
you
or
not
is it
hear
just
me?
me?
Uh-oh. Fringe, can you just please recycle quickly and we'll go straight to you as soon as you get back up. I think she might be glitching because on my side, just now when I called on her, there was no hand being raised. Go ahead, HG.
On my side, I saw a hand, but then it would go away and then it would come back. So I hope. Oh, there she is.
There she is. She's back. Go ahead with your question, Fringe.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to come to say hi and support you because I seen you guys were in here. I didn't hear the beginning, right? But I have two questions, so you might have already covered it. But I want to touch on your experience. I love the story, by the way. I was able to follow you through, and I do feel that you were almost out of your body. Like you were, yeah. So it's really good that your dad was there. I knew that something had happened, but I didn't know the story, so I'm glad I got to hear it. Uh, and I felt the jolt that your friend felt, whoever it was that touched you, that said you were taken. Yeah. So it like literally it like shook my entire body. So and yeah. So anyways, I love the story and I love that I get to go on that journey with you because I was able to see pieces of it as well. So uh now there's two things I want you to touch on if you can, if you haven't already, because I know that you've interviewed a gazillion amazing people and covered a lot of projects. So you've got this vast knowledge. So whenever I'm talking about you guys, I'm always like, they do all these whistleblowers. You got to just check out the channel. But I can't remember all the people, obviously, because you've interviewed a lot. Um, but one thing I want to ask is if you could explain or share a little bit about the crew of you at your conference, because you had a lot of badass people there, and your trip to go see that pyramid with the giants. And the second question is, well, it's not really a question. It's just if you could, if you can off your memory, name off the projects that you know, like that your whistleblowers have touched on, because you've had so many vast ones. And just to list off the different projects that you have heard, like kind of firsthand accounts of. I know two guys that were in our space last night, you know, mentioned one of them was in Gateway and one of them was in Sunstreak. And one of the ones that he mentions, and he's the only person I've heard mention, you might have heard it though, is room 52. So yeah, if you can just, because I'd like to hear, I see the pictures and stuff on Facebook, but it'd be nice to hear about your experience there and all the badass people that were there with your conference. And yeah, if you can just remember, name off some of the projects that you've heard, like firsthand accounts. And I agree with Tony Rodriguez's timeline thing too, by the way. And I sketch it out, even if it doesn't look like anything, and then go through from beginning to end. And it will help remember all the different experiences you have. So now my sketchbook is almost full. It helps to retain the information to go from the beginning, first picture you drew, to the second, to the third, then add the fourth, kind of thing. Anyway, it's nice to see you in spaces. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the questions. Really quickly about the conference. I mean, that's just so Journey to Truth. We host a conference every year in Grafton, Illinois. So we have our fourth one coming up in May this year. And after the conference, we go to Cahokia Mounds. If anybody knows what Cahokia Mounds is, it's like an ancient pyramid site in the northwest or Midwest. I'm sorry, North America. Um, and we go there, and yeah, there were giant skeletons and stuff, and we've actually done an entire documentary on the site, so it's amazing. There's tickets available, journeytotruth.online. If anybody wants to come, it's about 200 plus people every year. It's a fun event, and those, you can grab a ticket and come hang out with us. But it's, we always have, basically what we do is we interview all these people, and then we just pick like some of our favorites and just bring them to the conference and let them speak on stage, and everybody gets, you know, a couple hours or whatever it is, and it's a 4 day event, and it's a lot of fun. So that's journeytotruth.online. You can go to our website and find all that information. Thank you, Fringe, for bringing that up. And then the programs, my God, there's so many. You know, right off the top of my head, I thought of Project Bluebird. Rebecca Rose talks about, which is really interesting because it deals largely with trafficking humans, right? Child trafficking. But it's interesting. It's called Project Bluebird because guess what else is called Bluebird? All of our school buses that bring children to and from, you know, whatever school they're going to. Um, it's interesting that they would call it Project Bluebird, and then all the buses are Bluebird. And then if anybody's seen the Magic School Bus show, you know, that's, if you watch the first episode of the Magic School Bus, is 100% disclosure. I mean, the kids go to school, they think they're going to on a field trip, so like a museum, and then they go get on a school bus and they go to outer space. And like the class pet is a lizard. I mean, and there's so many weird. That whole show is just disclosure. But then another one is Project Pegasus, Andrew Basiago, the time travel program. He has one of the most incredible, if not my favorite testimony I've ever heard, just because his recall is just insane. Um, Project Pegasus is something to definitely look into, and it's very real time travel program. And then, you know, obviously the secret space program stuff like Solar Warden and Knocklofan and all that stuff where people are abducted into that. Um, Daryl James, he has, I think, the most sound testimony as far as actually, you know, joining the Navy and volunteering for the program, signing a literal stack of papers, and volunteering for the program, not being abducted into it. And his story is just absolutely wild. But man, I don't know. There's so many of them. I just can't think of that many off the top of my head.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I knew you touched on, like, because I would love to be able to remember, because I like to, certain people have really good skills with certain projects that they're involved in. And like, to me, you guys were somebody that, you could reference to if you want to learn about these projects, because you hosted so many people and you stayed neutral when you come to the interviews, which I know you caught some flack for that, which I didn't agree with. So yeah, but thank you for sharing. It's nice to see you in spaces. I had one other thing that just come to my mind, but I don't remember right now. Oh, did you ever hear of Room 52? Like, is that something that you've ever heard of?
No, I haven't, but I've heard of a number of other projects named after a room. And so obviously it could probably as simple as that. Like what Room 52 and whatever facility you were in, that was the name of the project. I mean, I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. It makes me think about the elevators. Do you have any experiences with that? Elevators and the time travel?
Not me in particular. I know a lot just from interviewing and researching. Um, I kind of talked about it earlier, the jump rooms and the elevators and stuff, but not personally, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler, what do you think this is? What do you know what? Let's talk about this 20 and back. I've talked to a couple people who are wondering what exactly is happening here. What are they doing? Is this something they want us to perceive as real? Is it actually real? Because there's a lot of overlap there with all the things we're talking about today. I've talked to people who think there might be an altar involved. Um, yeah. So what do you
Yeah,
think it
so
is?
it depends. I can answer this because this is what I study the most. That's why I was asked to do that presentation on the secret space program. But we've interviewed all the credible whistleblowers, at least that I consider credible, and some people that might not be credible, but we hear them out anyway. And there's a small handful of people that I think are really legitimate to have something to bring to the table. Um, so it depends on which program you're brought into. The German programs, they talk about being brought into the program, being cloned. Your original body is put in stasis. The clone body serves its tour, and at the end of the tour, whether the clone is killed or what happens when the clone expires, the consciousness is then put back into the original body, and then the original body is put back at the exact time it was taken. And so that's like the German program. And anybody who, like Penny Bradley, Dan Cooper, like some of those people, Dan Cooper, his testimony, he was born on the military base, and he has like a wild testimony, and I really believe his story. Um, and he's a quantum physicist as well, and he's developing like over unity devices and stuff. But he claims to be like genetically engineered, and him and his twin brother were born on base, and they were basically trained their whole lives to join the program. And when they were teenagers, they were brought into the programs and then brought back. But he has memory of it; like they didn't wipe his mind. Um, and then Daryl James, so he was stationed in RAF St. Maughan in Cornwall, New England, and it's a Royal Air Force base. And there were that's where like Michael Aquino actually was stationed. He was he was the head of the psychological operations division, psychological operations officer in the Army. But he was there as well, and Daryl says Michael Aquino was basically just if anybody doesn't know who he is, he's the creator of the Temple of Set. He's like a practicing Satanist. He was on Oprah, has those weird curly eyebrows. Um, he was just basically an avatar. Daryl said he would like sit in a room like just completely out of body for hours, like 12 hours straight, just lifeless. And then this like reptilian entity, when it needed his body, it would just enter his body and animate him. And then he would walk around base and do what he needed to do. But like if you caught him in the right light, you could like see the reptilian like overlay. He said that that's how that worked for him. But what happened with Daryl is he was made aware of the program. He was brought into the base, walked through a metal detector. It tests all your vitals. It can tell you what your IQ is, everything. And they saw that he had a high IQ. So they approached him about joining the program. And they first thing they did was brought him into a room with a gray. And they said, "Do you think you could work around one of these or whatever?" Long story, but it's an amazing testimony. And eventually he had to sign a stack of papers, and like he said, he started reading it, and the guy was like, "Don't read this, we'll be here forever." But Daryl said the one thing that he did read was the consciousness of the first party now belongs to the consciousness of the second party. He said he can never forget that. It was like on the first page of the contract. And he signed the holes. He said it was like a massive stack of papers. And then he was brought into what they call a density chamber, underground. They brought him to the underground facility in RF St. Maughan, and he has all the maps of the base, and he shows pictures of exactly where this all is and everything. And he's brought into the underground facility, and like walked out, and he was escorted by a very tall reptilian, like a physical reptilian with a tail and all this stuff. And they told him, they said, "By the way, you're going to be escorted by a reptile." And he's like, "What do you mean a reptile?" And because he didn't know, he's like, "You mean like a Komodo, like a big Komodo dragon?" He's like, "No, a walking reptile." He's like, "What?" He didn't know what a reptilian was. And Anyway, they put him in a density chamber. He said it looks like a gas chamber. And what the reason for that is because the extraterrestrials they deal with in space are fifth density beings. And so they have to put, you can't even perceive them unless you're in fifth density. So the entire space program is happening in fifth density. So they put you in a literal like gas chamber, they call it the density chamber, and it artificially pushes you from 3D to 5D, and it enhances your IQ by like 200 points, and like physically enhances you in like so many different ways, and it's only to acclimate you for the programs. And he said there's no spaceship or anything. He goes, they literally they brought him into another room, and there was what he calls a looking glass device. And the device was explained to him. He said it's you can look forward and back into the future, or you can step through the looking glass because it's a literal Stargate. And he said he was explained how it all worked, and he said they can look back in time, but they can't change anything because it creates a paradox and it screws up with the timeline. They learned their lesson so many times the hard way, so they stopped doing that. But they could look into the future but they can only get a 94% probability, and then like a 4% unknown and a 2% whatever. It's like it was a weird percentage, but they couldn't accurately depict the future, just get probabilities based on percentages. And then he said you could also walk through the looking glass, and that's what they did. I said it looks like basically just like what you would see in the Stargate show. And he said they walked through it, and they were literally on the backside of the moon, and that's where he was put in the mines. But it's a whole long story. I'm not going to sit here and tell his whole testimony, but. So if we're to believe his story, and like I'm telling you, like it checks out. He's one of my best friends. By now, uh, I'm actually going to when I leave St. Louis, I'm moving in with him in Florida, just temporarily before I look for a home. But I've interviewed him up and down. I've asked him every question sideways, and it never ceases to amaze me. And it checks out. And he has all of his military credentials. And there's since been a few more people that have been stationed at that base to confirm it. And that base is also an active spaceport if you look on Google Maps. But it's not a spaceport, but Google says it's a spaceport. So that's interesting too. Uh, so I think it's very real. To answer your question, I think it's absolutely very real. I know for a fact there is these Illuminati whistleblowers come out and they try to tell everybody that, oh, those are all like MK Ultra memories and their virtual reality memories. None of that happened. None of it happened. Of course, the devil would love for you to believe that it was all fake because they get away with murder. They literally get away with a galactic slave trade, human trafficking, everything that they're doing, they get away with if they can convince us into believing that it's all virtual reality or just false memories. Like, of course, those people will be put into play to try and trick people into thinking that it's really nonsense when it's not. It's actually happening. And Tony Rodriguez, he's another one who has a very, very solid testimony, and his is completely different because he was abducted into the programs. But he has he probably has the most evidence to support his claims. And we're filming a documentary with these guys, and we're going to really, it's going to be on Amazon Prime. We're really going to try, reach the skeptics and do due diligence because the fact that it gets made fun of is not okay because it's a real thing that people need to know about.
Okay, and the purpose of this is that what you're getting at? It's the human trafficking, it's free slave trade. Are you trying to say this is happening in the astral realm when you say fifth density?
No, it's just that the extraterrestrials exist in a higher density and we can't even perceive. They're walking around here right now next to all of us, but we can't perceive them because they're in a higher density, a
Okay,
higher
so you're not
frequency.
saying the secret space program is taking place in a different realm. You're where is it taking place, do
No,
you think?
it's taking place here, but in a different density, if that makes sense. If you can perceive if you could perceive the fifth density as a human while you're on Earth, you would see all the craft and all the ET that are right here all the time, but we can't perceive it. Every once in a while, we get glimpses and bleed through, and that's why people see things. And things, obviously, like right now, everything's weird on the planet. Who knows what's happening? But the way, Daryl described it, it's all like if you were to go like right now and look on Mars, you might not see it in a 3D form unless you were in fifth density. It's all existing, but in another, like where the ETs are fifth density. He said everybody that our military deals with in space, they're all fifth density, and they all go through the density chambers. They have to artificially put themselves in a higher density to even like deal with these beings, and some of them lower their density to come here, and it's like they have all sorts of technology to do it, but it's not like it's very real. It's just not how we always imagined it.
So, I mean, Amy speaks about this when she talks about. So, Amy's the gal. She was just up here trying to ask you about memory. She is an alien abductee, and she tries to explain it that they're here, they're everywhere, and I mean, some of us can see them, some of us can't. Sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. Uh, the actual alien ships are all over our skies that we just can't perceive them. Unlike, a lot of the human tech that we see flying around. But she's trying to explain it like it's almost like they're just vibrating at a different rate. And I know that gets kind of cliche.
Yeah,
Is
but
that what
that's
you're trying to
exactly it,
say?
though.
Okay, so that's the same thing when you mean by density. Like a fan, if it spins fast enough, you can't even see the blades. Something like that. Is that what you're saying? Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah, and Daryl was told too because he asked a lot of questions about like, well, how does this work? And he was told that every deep underground military base has a looking glass device. All of them. He said they all have a device where they can go to space underground. They don't need to take a ship. It's like a jump room. Um, They all have it. They've all adopted it, that technology. And he said that there's a number. He was told that there's a number of portals on the surface too. He said the Arch of Babylon at the Vatican, the St. Louis Arch, all the arches are gateways too. Like they call the St. Louis Arch the gateway to the West. He goes, if you were to able to see, it's a portal or a gateway for the fifth density beings. He said they pass through it all the time. He goes, if you were able to see or perceive the fifth density, you would see it as an active portal. But down here in the 3D, it just looks like an arch. And so a lot of those archways are actual portals, and that's why a lot of the ancient structures were archways and rock archways and stuff like that. Same thing. We just see it as an old rock formation, but it's doing a lot more in other densities.
Okay, and then Tyler, this is a selfish question. I don't remember if I asked you this on your show. Have you come across any of these people who get called by a number? I think I told you that I get called by a number.
Yeah, I mean, there's a movie getting ready to come out called Mickey 17, and have you seen that? It's basically about this guy gets cloned, and he's number 17 is he's just the 17th version of him, so they call him number 17. Like, so 16 of him have already like joined the programs and died, and then he's number 17. So that's interesting. I have a memory of being taken to Diego Garcia out in the Indian Ocean, and I was number 3, and there were 8, and the reason I was number 3 is there was only 8 of us. It was like basically an experiment. They were trying to use I don't know what they were trying to do, but each one of us, like 8 was very specific for their experiment, and each one of us was like very specifically designed to do something very specific. And I just remember being called number 3. I remember seeing my paperwork, and I didn't have like I wanted to know my name, and I looked on the paperwork, and I was literally just number 3. And that's how I knew I was at Diego Garcia, because I saw on the paperwork where I was stationed it said Diego Garcia. And then, of course, we interviewed Mark Demizio, another guy, and he claims to be number 8. Like, he had the same testimony. That's how we were like, holy shit. I was like, dude, like, that was like, and we've been connecting, like, and comparing memories and all this stuff. And it's like unreal, actually. But it was a very, we were just tortured. They put these devices on our heads, and they would, it was just horrible. I don't know what the hell they were actually trying to achieve, but so it just could be the number of test subjects in the study that they're doing, and you just might be number 11, you might be number 8, or there could be a specific. It could be the version of you. You could be number 8 because the first 7 of you have already died and failed. I mean, I think that there could be a number of explanations for it.
Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate that answer. It's probably the clearest answer I've ever gotten. So I appreciate that. Miss M, jump in.
I just wanted to, and as far as the parasites, parasites are huge. There's a lot of people who've done, I'm not the first person to do any studies on this. I'm sure a lot of ears will know what I'm talking about. A lot of comparisons to parasites and demons. Our gut is our first brain, and when you get a lot of parasites in your gut, they're the ones that are kind of telling you, oh, I need sugar. Oh, I need processed food or whatever. Um, I had a really good. I'm a big believer on the detox stuff. It really helped with heavy metals. I used for parasites for sure. You want to do like wormwood. I did zeolite and xylitol. Those really helped flush, especially for women. And Tyler had mentioned it for males, the testicles for the metals. Um, I'm not the biggest excited person to go to a phlebotomist at a hospital. I have a lot of trigger memories with hospitals. But there's a lot of communities out there that'll help with that stuff. I just wanted to add that in there. And then another thing, real quick, is the elevator thing. I was wondering if as far as the elevator time travel, I mentioned earlier that I related to you, Fringe, in regards to time jumper, um, astral type stuff. Uh, I've had a lot of dreams of elevators specifically. Um, One in particular was probably part of like Alice programming because it had a lot of keys all over the floor. I just remember specifically being a bunch of these keys, and one stood out to me. I picked it up, and it's what I needed to get into this elevator. In the elevator, as I go to push a button to try to find a button to push, all of the numbers are not numbers. I ended up finding a young man. They were symbols, these weird symbols I'd never seen before in my life. And I'm very lucid and aware in my dreams. So I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm already making a mental note of this. But I, I wonder if, like I said, they definitely they love to access us in the realm of sleep. And I wonder if anyone else has dreamt about these elevators. I've never, that I know of, been in an elevator and gone somewhere else, but
You,
in the
you
dreams I
know,
have.
Max Spears talked about his experience in the elevator. He said the jump room that he's aware of is at 999 Sepulveda Boulevard in LAX, right outside the LAX airport. Um, he remembers being
Fascinating.
he remembers being taken there, specifically the address. And there's actually two of them there. But it's some jump room to Mars, and or one of them. Apparently, they're all over the place. But that's the one he was taken to. And when he went in it, he remembered the countdown: 30
Hmm.
seconds to Mars, 20 seconds to Mars, 10 seconds to Mars, and then the doors open and you're on Mars. And he said it was after he got out of that program that the band 30 Seconds to Mars came out. And he's like, oh shit, like
Wow.
that's the jump room. That's where they got like so. And then he started looking into that band and like so even the bands like there's so much like symbolism just hidden and peppered throughout society within the music industry and Hollywood and all of it. We understand that, but it's all there for us to see and it's hiding in plain sight. You would never know that 30 Seconds to Mars is literally talking about the jump room. You just never think
Well,
about
well, yeah. I mean, Jared Leto did buy a very famous Laurel Canyon property. So, and there's a lot of theories on his childhood. More than likely, probably being a trauma-based mind control kid. Um, we all know that if you're in this community, you probably have heard of it. Like there's so much to these webs, right? And they're all connected. Um, but as far as the elevator thing, with people, and I probably Vicky Joy would be someone to talk to about this too. But what do you think, Fringe and Tyler and Hiker Gal or anybody about? Because in these dreams, I've had the elevator ones a lot. Most of the dreams that I'll have, and sometimes my dreams will be I'll be aware that I'm a different part of my DID of my fractures, um, and I'll be in a lot of uh, ones was in a castle, and I'm like trying to get these kids to come with me. We're on this weird abandoned. It's almost like it's like a castle like material that this building is. But it starts off at the bottom of a warehouse. And for whatever reason, I remember how to get around. And I'm getting these kids out. Um, and this little boy looks to me and he just says, "We have to be by the archway." So I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. We're gonna go. We just have to be quiet." I'm not afraid, but I'm fully aware that we're all being watched. And but I have this knowing that I'm gonna get past this archway. Now we get to an archway. It's the way out, and it's kind of in a medieval shape archway where it's almost like a rounded A. Not like the archways in France, but like A has a cornerstone point. And once I walk past that, we are being chased by I can hear dogs, and I'm able to get us by this tree, which very like Gaia programming and Mother Goddess programming. The tree is like the tree of life, which is also kind of Cabal symbolism. And I get us to behind this tree where there's these hedges. I really want to make sure that these kids can get behind this hedge. Once I get them all behind the hedge, once I'm also behind the tree, just bright white light, and then I wake up. I have these dreams where I'm running, and like I said, I'm different parts sometimes, elevators, um, but also these warehouse buildings, and I'm always brought back. I was working with a fellow survivor, helping me with some of this stuff. They're now a counselor for these things, for trauma, and she was mentioning, she said, I had already figured out the references and the points, but when it came down to having these dreams in these warehouses, she pointed out, well, remember what you told me about the gate program? When you were in there, they used to make you build these models out of these blocks. And I remember those distinctly, I don't know if I'm an 80s kid. They had these wooden blocks that would be painted different colors. There'd be rectangles, squares, cylinders, triangles, um, nothing larger than the palm of a kid's hand, but they were all a bunch of these, and I would be told, okay, now make a floor plan of like a house. So I'm a kid, I'm like, what, second grade, and I'd make these floor plans, and then they'd have me copy these other floor plans, or give me like a schematic, and I'd put those, build it however I could with whatever the pieces I had. Sometimes we'd use toothpicks and marshmallows. Sometimes we would use, one time they gave us tape and we would have to make these bridges. But most of the time, me and another kid, a boy, we were teamed up and we would be building these maps, basically like a floor plan. And it was like those damn dreams. And this healing process, and as far as like what Amy was asking in regards to like memory retrieval, it's not always safe to force these memories back, no matter what they are, whether it's an abduction or, in my case, maybe something even deeper. But the they will come when they're supposed to. And I agree with Tyler in regards to like there's kind of an awareness that's already there. I mean, a lot of us are really hyper vigilant. So we're kind of always aware, even if we don't register it right away. Um, but I went on a tangent there. I'm so sorry. But it just it struck me super fascinating in regards to the elevators and there's a lot to be said about the gate stuff too. Um, you know, they were looking for talented and gifted. They were looking for a certain kind. That's a whole nother story in itself that I've got. But yeah. So I apologize if I got us off topic.
No,
But
don't apologize. If
that
you're,
elevator thing is intense to me right now.
yeah, don't apologize. If you're too far off topic, we will gently lead you back. On the elevator thing, I have a ton of dreams of being in elevators. I've had at least two during abductions, actual abductions. I've seen elevators, and this is why I love people like Amy, because Amy has a lot of just straight alien abduction experience. And when I see the couple of times I've seen an elevator in an abduction experience, and I'm just thinking, aliens don't have elevators in a spaceship. That just sounds so ridiculous. And I can write to Amy and go, hey, and without being embarrassed, I can say, hey, Amy, have you ever seen an elevator? Oh, yeah, they have elevators. Like, what? Okay, because a lot of times during these experiences, for my first part of getting in touch with researchers, I was being told, well, a lot of what you're remembering, because I have a lot of just conscious recall, and this is what Amy is looking for. She does a lot of regression, but what she's trying to get is conscious recall. So my recall is all conscious recall. And I can go, oh my gosh, what is there an elevator doing in an alien spaceship? And I can actually stand there and go, is this a screen? Is this an overlay? Am I seeing something that's not actually there? Do they want me to think there's an elevator? I mean, I can go through the whole process while I'm actually standing there. So I've been separate from that, separate from abductions, which off the top of my head, I can think of 2 times I was in an elevator. I definitely have the elevator dreams, but in my dreams, Miss M, the elevator dreams, I'm going up to a very high floor. I'm going very fast in the elevator. Sometimes the elevator very often will drop and spin. The building that I'm in will just collapse. So not anything, it doesn't sound like anything similar to what you were trying to explain. If we want to go to Tyler and Heiko Gal on elevators, and then the Fringe, I'm not sure if that's on the same topic or not, and we'll get to her as well.
Yeah. So really quick, and then I'm gonna probably have to get going. But the elevator thing. So have you seen the show Fringe? I imagine
If that's for me, I
Fringe.
have not. Is that for Miss M?
Okay.
I haven't seen any of these shows.
No,
I haven't
no,
seen
it's
Stranger Things. I haven't seen any of them.
yeah. So it's for you, Fringe. And I thought maybe this is why you even chose Fringe as the name because that show talks about everything that you've ever experienced. It's all that's all covered in that show. But it also talks about the whole big premise of the show is that there's a parallel Earth, a parallel universe, and they're always like swapping assets from this reality to that reality. If like a politician dies in this reality, they go to the parallel reality and pull them from there and bring them over here and whatever. There's this. It's all about that. But guess how they get to the parallel Earth
Don't
through
tell me
through
elevators.
through an elevator in the Empire State Building, and it goes up to the top floor, and
Oh,
then
my dream elevator dreams are in fact inside the Empire State Building, so that's great.
seriously, yeah,
Oh no,
that's
I'm not even
yeah,
joking. Yeah, I have it written in my
yeah,
journal. Yeah. Wow.
yeah. So it's an elevator inside the Empire State Building,
Great.
and
That's
it
fantastic.
takes them to the parallel Earth, and that shows like major disclosure, but um, you should look into that because I mean your name is Fringe. I mean, there's way too many connections to
Yeah,
not
my
look
name
into.
being Fringe actually has nothing to do with that. It actually has to do, well, I don't know what it has to do with, but people have also pointed out that Carla Turner's book was called Into the Fringe, which I didn't know, and here the space is named Into the Fringe. Yeah, just coincidence. I don't watch any of those creepy shows. I think the creepiest show I watched that I really liked was the OA. Do you guys remember OA, the original Angel? I thought that was really cool because again, I have memories of, well, first of all, breathing underwater, being able to breathe underwater, but also being in these vats of liquid. And in the OA, they put them in the vat of liquid to get to the near death experience. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. Hiker Gal, did you have anything on the elevators? And then we'll go to the French.
Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and I gotta get it going, guys.
Can you
So
just wait 1 second?
yeah, of course. I'll wait a minute. Yeah.
Go ahead, the Fringe. It's okay.
Go
I can
ahead,
wait.
French. Jump in.
Okay. I was actually just not going to say anything. I'm sitting there and I'm listening to her talk about keys, and because I know I've seen a lot of elevators. I get a lot in the astral too, and save children in the astral, do all that type of stuff too. But as soon as Tyler started talking and he said Max Spears, it like flashed, and I remembered because the first time I seen Max Spears in the astral, he said to me, "I'm gonna love this," and he was kind of like smirking, and he gave me a hug, and I felt this huge rush of energy in my heart, and all of a sudden went up an elevator, up a few floors, and I had to deal with some family members that were there. They were like, "You can do this, you can do this." That's the only part that I remember right now because it was a lot. But so, and you were mentioning the places that he talked about, so I want to know the places, but just first, then Fringe started talking about going up many floors, and I remembered I've done the same thing many times, and I've done the spinning too. And when Tyler talked about the movie or the show, The Fringe, I've never seen it either, but my one friend who I pay attention to synchronicity since 2020, she kept telling me for like the last few years, you got to watch the movie The Fringe. And I had no idea that it was involving elevators either. And my name, I picked The Fringe when I got back on Twitter because everybody was doing the crudo. It was, fuck crudo kind of thing. And so it's been The Fringe. So anyway, it's just synchronicities and stuff. But I'd like to know the places, because you said it really fast, that Max Spears talked about with the elevator, if you can, before you go.
Yeah, it's 999 Sepulveda Boulevard, and it's actually I forgot, he actually named a specific floor of the building. I was just there in earlier this year, and for a conference, and a couple people at the conference, I didn't go, but they went to the building, and they took the elevator up to the floor, and that floor was closed off because it was government property, and they could not access that floor. Um, so somebody's actually tried to go there, and that was just this year. But the building's there, you can go, and so that's another thing, like that these whistleblowers talk about, is this stuff sometimes isn't underground. Like Andrew Bishago talked about the jump room that the kids were using for Project Pegasus was literally in an abandoned school gymnasium that people drove by it every day, had no idea that people were literally teleporting to other times and time traveling right in that gymnasium. They just drive past it, like they're in office buildings sometimes. Like it could very well could be like in the floor of that building in LA. You just don't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't
Hey,
know, and it's
Tyler, I
just.
don't know if you ever Googled that address. My husband just Googled it, and there is an aerospace company registered to somewhere on the fifth floor of that building. So that's interesting.
Of
Oh,
course.
that maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe that's what he was talking about.
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for hanging out with us. You made it quite
Yes.
quite a ways here. Lots of questions. Thank you so much for telling your story. We might hang around for just a couple minutes after you take off, but we appreciate your time today. Thank you for being willing to tell your story. This is this is as fringe as it gets. You know, it's even more fringe than alien abduction. I mean, it just doesn't get any worse. And again, it's a topic that a lot of people make fun of, and they just think we're liars and grifters, and that's great because they can say in their safe space and call us liars and grifters because it's never happened to them. What do you say to the skeptics and debunkers before you leave? And then we'll close it shortly after you leave the space. Thank you.
Oh man, what do I say to them? I quit saying anything to them because I realize you're just not going to reach somebody if they're not at that level of awareness. If they haven't, like you said, if they haven't experienced it or gone through it, then it's just not real for them. And like your beliefs and thoughts create your reality. And sometimes I really believe these people are living in some version of the matrix where this none of this stuff is perceivable to them, and they're so under mind control and indoctrinated from their through their degrees and diplomas and all that stuff. And I mean, it's a literal program. So sometimes the skeptics, you just leave them alone. I realized a long time ago, I used to try to wake people up, and I used to get into debates and arguments, and then it was just kill me. It was draining me. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? So I would meditate on it and like, okay, my job is to just present the information, and that's it. And however people receive it, whatever they want to do with it, that's up to them. And whether they believe it or not, then I don't even give a shit at this point. Like I used to like have to defend myself. I'm like, no, but, no, but, no, but, you don't understand. No, and then I'm just like, no, I'm going to say it. It's real. I believe it. I've experienced it. And if the skeptics have an issue with that, then that's fine. They're just not there yet. And there's nothing you can do or say to convince them. That's their own path.
I agree. HG, do you want to say something to close it out? Tyler, just feel free to jet out if you're on a time crunch there before we close.
One
Yeah, I
thing,
just want to say one thing really quick. Anybody who wants to follow us, if you just go to my profile, the pinned tweet, post, whatever you want to call it, has all of our links to everything we do. And we're just trying to rebuild after being wiped out on every platform. So any like and subscribe or follow is greatly appreciated, and that's all we ask from you. And thank you for allowing me to be here. This has been amazing, and I am going to jet out. We've been here for quite some time, and I got a couple things to do before I go to sleep. So
Before you
this
go,
has been,
can I send you a
yeah,
D
okay,
before you go, can I send you a DM? Because I want to ask you a very specific question. I know you got a jet.
yeah. I mean, if it's quick, you can ask right
No, no, no,
now.
no, no. This is going to be a more kind of involved, and I don't want to keep you. So I'm just
Okay,
asking, can I send you a DM?
yeah, please. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, feel free to.
Super duper fantastic. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You have a great evening.
All right, bye, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tyler. Good night. Wow. Incredible. Okay, so you experience these things. I experience these things. Now we have Miss M. We have other people we won't name because maybe they want to stay more private. Um, it's happening to a lot of us. And Tyler's just a wealth of information because he's interviewed, not only has it happened to him, but he's also interviewed a lot of people, with different things. And that's how you put the puzzle together, is just by getting pieces from wherever they are. What do you think, Hiker Gal?
I think I need to go binge watch their show and get caught up on that. Because as you know, when I went on vacation recently, I listened to a plethora of UFO abduction case books, and so now I feel like I am finally getting caught up on a whole lot of things, only to have this bombshell dropped in my lap. So this is kind of exciting and exhilarating. And as terrible as that may sound, because I have this sound of joy in my speech, in my tone, it does give me a little bit of validation of exactly things that I'm going through. It really does. So I'm a little excited about that. So now I have a jump point to, no pun intended, really, jump point to where to go to educate myself even further. So I'm so glad you had him come in. I'm really, really glad. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. And yeah, he was great and just a wealth of information. I appreciate him being here. Thank you so much, Miss M, for jumping in. Anybody who came up and asked a question or shared a story, we appreciate you. And we very much appreciate people just listening. A lot of what we talk about is specifically, well, maybe all my spaces, but especially these. It just sounds like science fiction, you guys. We know it sounds like science fiction. But it's very therapeutic to be able to get into a space like this and to be able to just talk about the things that happens to us and share it with other people it's happening to. And we appreciate anybody who will tune in and listen just with an open mind. Just ask yourself, is it possible this cuckoo for crazy Cocoa Puff stuff is actually happening? And just keep an open mind. We just truly appreciate you, all of the listeners. Thank you so much. And Hiker Gal, if you want to close it out, I will end the space.
Yes, thank you to everyone that came and listened, and thank you for having an open mind. Fringe is right. This stuff sounds just so insane, but there is an excellent quote from John D'Souza, who is an ex-FBI agent, who wrote a book called Extra Dimensionals that I am currently going through, and he said, and it just resonated with me so much, that experiential truth is the greatest truth. And that just resonates with me. Just keeping an open mind and just listening to everybody's truth, because somewhere along the way, all the puzzle pieces are with each of us. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining and listening and participating. We really do
And
appreciate it.
you know what, Hiker Gal? There will be spaces about this space. People are actually going to hold spaces and talk about how we allowed this discussion to take place. So that's always that's always nice to know. So here we
And
are.
and my response to that is, yay.
Yeah, you want to know what's
Yay.
interesting? People who advocate for free speech are the same people who think we should not be allowed to talk about these things in the UFO community because
Exactly.
it's dangerous. It's so weird. I don't get
Oh,
it, but here we are,
yeah, it's dangerous, irresponsible. How dare you?
bringing
You know,
liars and grifters into the community. How do you platform these people? Well, I don't know. It's happening to me a few times a week, so here I am.
yeah, and yet here we still are. And, I mean, I don't even know how many people are in here, but or who will listen over the next few days, and it's like, I'm sorry, but that speaks volumes in and of itself. So, they want to salivate and, lose get triggered, so be it. But again, experiential truth is the greatest truth, and I'm sorry if that truth just upsets your worldview. Because I mean, we've had our lives, our worldview upended, and yet we're still here. So there you go.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, you guys, thank you all so much, and good night. We'll see you at the next one. I think Hiker Gal Vicky Joy on the 16th.
Okay.
And I'll hit you up about that. So good night,
Yeah,
everyone.
no worries. Good night, everybody.